"Eyes, Emma," she said, struggling to her feet with Rose in her arms. Her head swam with the movement, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision. "Let's go." The distance seemed to stretch impossibly as they stumbled forward. The sun rose. Higher, its heat pressing down on them like a physical weight. Rose had grown terrifyingly still, no longer whimpering or stirring in Sarah's arms. Thomas and Emma trudged beside her, no longer speaking, conserving what little strength remained. When they finally reached the patch of green, Sarah could have wept with relief. A small spring bubbled from the base of the mesa, creating a shallow pool before disappearing again into the earth. Cottonwood trees and willows grew around it, their leaves rustling softly in the morning breeze. "Water!" Thomas cried, breaking into a stumbling run. "Wait," Sarah called, but her voice was too weak to carry. "Test it first." But the children were already at the pool, Emma helping Thomas cup his hands to drink, while Sarah carefully lowered Rose to the soft grass at the water's edge. The water, when Sarah finally reached it herself, was cool and sweet on her parched tongue. She drank carefully, knowing too much too quickly could make them ill, then soaked her kerchief to bathe Rose's feverish face. The relief was so overwhelming that Sarah failed to notice the shadow that fell across the spring until Emma gasped. Looking up, Sarah froze, her hand instinctively moving to shield her children. A man stood at the edge of the small clearing, watching them with unreadable dark eyes. He was tall and powerfully built, dressed in buckskin leggings and a loose cotton shirt, his long black hair braided with leather thongs and decorated with a single eagle feather. A knife hung at his belt, and though he carried no other visible weapons, his presence radiated a quiet strength that made it clear he needed none. He was Apache, Sarah realized with a cold spike of fear. The settlers' tales of Apache raids and ruthless warriors flashed through her mind, stories told around fires to frighten children and justify military campaigns. Her father's voice, slurred with whiskey, declaring all Indians savages who ought to be put down like rabid dogs. Yet the man made no move toward them, simply studying them with calm curiosity. After a long moment he spoke, his English accented but clear. "The child is sick." It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway, instinctively pulling Rose closer. "She has a fever." The man's gaze shifted to Rose, then back to Sarah's face. Something flickered in his expression. Compassion, perhaps, or recognition of their desperate state. "This is good water," he said, gesturing to the spring, "but not safe place for white women and children." Fear and exhaustion made Sarah reckless. "We have nowhere else to go." The man considered this, his head tilting slightly as he studied them. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the gentle sound of the spring and Rose's labored breathing. Finally, he spoke again. "I'm called Shíí'ĩ," he said, touching his chest. "It means he who protects in your tongue." He gestured toward the mesa. "My people camp beyond the rocks. The grandmother knows medicine for fever." Sarah looked down at Rose's flushed her face, then at Emma and Thomas, their eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. What choice did she really have? Stay here and watch her daughter's fever worsen, or trust this stranger who offered help? "My name is Sarah," she said finally. "These are my children, Emma, Thomas, and Rose." She met Shíí'ĩ's gaze directly. "We would be grateful for your help." Shíí'ĩ nodded once, solemnly, as if they had made some formal pact. "Rest, drink. I will return with horses." As he turned to go, Sarah called after him, the question she couldn't suppress spilling from her lips. "Why would you help us?" Shíí'ĩ paused, looking back at her with those unfathomable dark eyes. "The eagle led me to this place today," he said simply. "I do not question the eagle's wisdom." Then he was gone, moving silently among the rocks, leaving Sarah to wonder if she had just made the best decision of her life, or the worst. Earlier that morning, before the sun had fully risen above the eastern mesas, Shíí'ĩ had stood alone on a high ridge, watching the eagle circle against the pale dawn sky. In his right hand, he held the eagle feather that marked him as chief of his small band, a position he had held for 7 summers now. The feather had belonged to his father before him, and his father's father before that, a symbol of leadership passed down through generations. The eagle's flight had drawn him from his morning prayers, its spiraling path unusual enough to catch his attention. Among his people, such signs were not dismissed as mere coincidence. The winged ones spoke in their own way to those who knew how to listen. Shíí'į had followed the eagle's guidance, moving silently through the familiar landscape of juniper and sage, rock and sand. He knew every contour of this hidden canyon and the surrounding desert, had hunted here as a boy under his father's watchful eye, had led his first war party across these same plains as a young man, and now maintained this sanctuary for his people in increasingly dangerous times. The band called themselves Ndé, the people, though the whites had named them all Apaches, lumping together distinct tribes with their own ways and territories. Shíí'ì's band was small, just 23 families, who had managed to avoid both the reservations and the military campaigns that had claimed so many of their brothers and sisters. Their relative safety came from their isolation and Shíí'ì's careful leadership, avoiding conflict when possible, though every warrior among them had proven their courage in battle when necessary. The eagle had led him to the hidden spring, a place known to his people for generations. Finding the white woman and her children there had been unexpected, surprising enough that Shíí'ì momentarily wondered if this was what the eagle had intended him to find all along. Now, as he made his way back to the village, Shíí'ì considered the decision he had just made. Bringing outsiders to their hidden canyon was not without risk. The woman clearly posed no immediate threat, exhausted, desperate, with children in tow. But where there was one white settler, others often followed. And yet he could not have left them there to die, the small one burning with fever, the others close to collapse from their journey. The village came into view as he rounded the bend in the narrow canyon, a collection of traditional wickiups arranged in a loose circle with a central area for cooking fires and ceremonies. Children played among the dwellings, women worked at cooking fires or scraped hides, while men repaired weapons or tended to the horses in the corral built against the canyon wall. It was a scene of ordinary life, preserved against the tide of change that had swept so many other bands away. "You return early from your prayers, brother," called a voice from beside the nearest wickiup. Naugai, Shíí'ì's cousin, straightened from where he had been repairing a bow, though they had grown up together, sharing the same teachings and training. Naugai had always harbored resentment that the leadership had passed to Shíí'ì rather than himself. He was a skilled warrior and hunter, respected for his abilities, but his quick temper and harsh judgments had made him unsuitable for leadership in the eyes of the elders. "The eagle showed me something that could not wait," Shíí'ì replied, evenly. "I need 2 horses with a travois. There are people at the hidden spring who need our help." Naugai's expression darkened. "What people? Not whites?" The question came out as an accusation. "A woman and 3 small ones," Shíí'ì said, meeting his cousin's gaze steadily. "The youngest is sick with fever, and you would bring them." "Here?" Naugai's voice rose, drawing the attention of others nearby. "Have you forgotten what happened to the billowed band when they trusted whites? All dead or on the reservation now." "I have forgotten nothing," Shíí'ì said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of authority. "But I will not leave children to die in the desert, no matter their skin color. This is a matter for the council," Naugai insisted, looking around for support. Several of the older men were already approaching, drawn by the raised voices. "There is no time," Shíí'ì replied. "The child may die without help. I will take responsibility for them." Nju, Shíí'ì's grandmother and the band's healer, emerged from her wickiup, her ancient face creased with curiosity, though bent. With age, her eyes remained sharp, missing nothing. "What child needs healing?" she asked, her voice surprisingly strong, despite her years. Shíí'į turned to her with respect. A white child with fever, grandmother. At the hidden spring, with her mother and siblings. Nju considered this, her gnarled fingers moving. To the medicine bundle that hung at her waist, a small deerskin pouch containing herbs, crystals, and other sacred items gathered over a lifetime of healing. I had a dream of strangers, she said finally. Bring them. The spirits will decide if they are meant to be here. With Nju's endorsement, even Naogai fell silent, though his disapproval remained evident in the tight set of his jaw. The council elders exchanged glances but offered no objection. Shíí'ì's authority, combined with the healer's support, was enough. Two young men quickly prepared horses, attaching a travois to one for the sick child and mother. Nju handed Shíí'ì a small pouch of herbs. For the fever, she said, until they can be brought to me. Shíí'ì tucked the pouch into his belt and mounted his horse, leading the second animal by its rawhide rein. As he prepared to leave, his younger sister Kizhoni approached, her expression curious. Dust billowed across the parched Arizona territory as Sarah Matthews stumbled forward, her three young children huddled against her skirts. Behind them lay the burning remnants of her father's homestead and his whiskey-fueled rage. Ahead, only the vast, unforgiving desert. When her legs finally gave way beside a hidden spring, Sarah prepared for death's embrace. Instead, she found herself looking into the eyes of Shíí'ì, an Apache chief whose gaze held both wisdom and unexpected tenderness. Within days, this warrior who commanded respect from his people offered her something she'd never known: dignity, protection, and a love that defied the harsh boundaries between their worlds. But could such a union survive in a land where both settlers and tribe elders viewed their bond as betrayal? Would the wounded heart of a white woman truly find healing in the arms of an Apache warrior? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Matthews had not always lived under the shadow of fear. Her fingers absently traced the outline of the small silver locket hanging at her throat, the last connection to a life that seemed to belong to someone else now. Inside lay a faded tintype of John, her husband, his kind eyes and gentle smile, forever preserved behind the tarnished metal. 4 years had passed since consumption had taken him, leaving her alone with 2 small children and another on the way. "Mama, I'm thirsty again." Emma tugged at her tattered sleeve, her 10-year-old, face serious beyond her years. Of her 3 children, Emma had suffered the most under her grandfather's rule, old enough to understand the danger but too young to escape it. "I know, sweet girl." Sarah smoothed her daughter's sun-bleached hair, the strands brittle from days, without proper washing. "We'll find water soon." The lie tasted bitter on her parched lips. They had been walking for 3 days since fleeing her father's homestead. 3 days of rationing the last drops from a single canteen among 4 souls. 3 days of carrying little Rose when her 2-year-old legs could no longer manage another step. 3 days of Thomas's increasingly frightened questions that Sarah could no longer answer with anything resembling hope. "Where are we going?" Thomas asked again, his 7-year-old voice cracking from thirst. His once bright eyes were sunken now, his cheeks dusted with the same red dirt that coated them all. "Somewhere safe," Sarah answered, the same words she had been repeating since they fled. But in truth, she had no destination in mind beyond away. Away from the man who had once been her father, before the war and the whiskey had hollowed him, out leaving only rage where love should have been. It hadn't always been like this. Sarah could still remember a time when Jeremiah Matthews had been a respected shopkeeper in St. Louis, a man who taught her to read by lamplight and brought peppermint sticks home on Sundays. That was before her mother died, before the business failed, before he began drinking away what little money remained. By the time Sarah met and married John, her father had become someone she scarcely recognized. John had protected her. With his quiet strength and steady hands, he had built them a life in a small Arizona settlement, a simple existence running a modest dry goods store. For 6 years, they had known happiness. John never raised his voice, never lifted a hand in anger, and looked at their children with nothing but wonder and pride. He had kept her father at bay, limiting his visits and never allowing him to stay more than a night. But John could not protect them from the tuberculosis that claimed him one harsh winter, leaving Sarah a widow at 26 with Emma, Thomas, and an infant Rose. With John gone, her father had appeared like a dark shadow over their lives, insisting they could not survive alone, declaring the store mismanaged, selling it for a fraction of its worth. He had used the money to purchase a remote homestead 20 miles from the nearest neighbor, dragging them all to that desolate place he claimed would be their salvation. For 2 years, Sarah had endured. 2 years of his drunken tirades, of hiding, the children when the whiskey bottle emptied too quickly, of mending torn clothes and tending to bruises that bloomed like desert flowers across her skin. She had remained for the children's sake, telling herself that a roof and food, however meager, were better than the unknown. Until 3 nights ago, when her father had turned his fury toward Emma for the first time. "You look too much like your grandmother," he had slurred, grabbing the girl's arm with fingers that would leave purple marks by morning. "Same defiant eyes, same way of looking at me like I'm nothing." Sarah had not thought, had not planned. She had simply acted, swinging, the cast-iron skillet with all the strength left in her work-worn body. The sickening crack as it connected with her father's skull still echoed in her dreams, though she knew he had only been stunned, not seriously injured. While he lay sprawled on the packed dirt floor, she had gathered the children and what few provisions she could carry, fleeing into the night as a summer storm brewed on the horizon. Thunder had masked their escape, and the subsequent rain had hopefully erased their tracks. But Sarah harbored no illusions about her father's determination. Once recovered, Jeremiah Matthews would come looking for them, not out of love or concern, but because he considered them his property, and Jeremiah Matthews did not surrender what was his without a fight. "Mama, Rose is getting very warm." Emma's worried voice pulled Sarah from her thoughts. The child in her arms whimpered softly, her small face flushed despite the relentless heat. Panic fluttered in Sarah's chest as she pressed her lips to her youngest child's forehead. The fever that had begun as a slight warmth that morning now burned hot against her skin. "Without water, without shelter, without medicine, we need to keep moving," Sarah said, adjusting Rose in her arms. "There must be water nearby. Desert creatures survive somehow." She forced confidence into her voice, though her heart hammered. With dread, they continued their stumbling march through the afternoon, the sun an unforgiving eye watching their desperate progress. The landscape remained stubbornly the same. Red earth, scrub brush, the occasional twisted juniper offering scant shade. In the distance, rocky mesas rose like sentinels, seeming no closer despite hours of walking toward them. Thomas began to lag behind, his small legs struggling to maintain the pace. "I can't, Mama," he finally said, dropping to his knees. "I'm too tired." Sarah stopped, despair threatening to overwhelm her. Her arms ached from carrying Rose, her lips were cracked and bleeding, and the dizziness that had been her companion since morning was growing stronger. The canteen, when she shook it, made no sound. "Empty. We'll rest a moment," she said, carefully lowering herself to sit beside Thomas. Emma collapsed next to them, her thin shoulders heaving with exhaustion. Rose stirred restlessly in Sarah's arms, her breathing quick and shallow. The child needed water desperately. They all did. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah made her decision. They could not continue without water. The mesas in the distance, offered their only hope. Perhaps there would be a spring, a seep, some moisture trapped in the shadows of the rocks. "Come, children," she said, rising unsteadily to her feet, "just a little farther." Emma helped Thomas up, and they resumed their journey, three small figures against the vastness of the desert. The distance to the mesas seemed impossible, but Sarah fixed her eyes on them and put one foot in front of the other again and again, while the weight of Rose grew heavier in her arms. The sun had slipped behind the western ranges, the brief desert twilight fading to darkness, when Sarah's foot caught on a stone. She stumbled, nearly dropping Rose, and when she regained her balance, she realized she could go no further. Her legs simply refused to obey, her strength finally exhausted. "We'll stop here," she whispered, sinking to her knees. "Rest now." "But, Mama, there's no water," Emma said, her voice thin with fear. "Tomorrow," Sarah promised, the lie coming easily now. "We'll find water tomorrow." She gathered her children close as the desert night enveloped them, the temperature dropping rapidly. Without the sun's heat, the stars emerged, brilliant and indifferent to their suffering, while the moon cast silver light across the barren landscape. Sarah had never been a particularly religious woman, but that night, with her children huddled against her and her youngest, burning with fever in her arms, she prayed. She prayed for water, for shelter, for some miracle to spare her children the fate that seemed increasingly certain. She prayed until exhaustion claimed her, pulling her into a fitful sleep filled with dreams of cool, clear streams that remained forever just beyond reach. She woke to Thomas shaking her shoulder, his voice urgent. "Mama, Mama, look!" Sarah opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented by the soft grey light of dawn. Rose still lay against her chest, her breathing labored. Emma stood a few feet away, pointing. "There, Mama, I see green." Sarah followed her daughter's gesture, squinting into the distance. There, at the base of the nearest mesa, perhaps half a mile away, was a patch of deeper color against the red earth, the unmistakable green of vegetation. And where there was green, there might be water. Hope, dangerous and fragile, fluttered in Sarah's chest. "Good. Is it true?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "You found white children at the spring?" At 16 summers, Shíí'ĩ was caught between childhood and womanhood, still possessing the curiosity of youth, but beginning to understand the complexities of their precarious existence. Unlike many of the tribe, she had spent time at a mission school before Shíí'ĩ had brought her home, and she spoke English with more fluency than most. "Yes," Shíí'ĩ replied. "A mother with 3 little ones. The smallest is sick. May I come with you?" Shíí'ĩ asked, her eyes bright with interest. "I can help with the children, speak to them so they won't be afraid." Shíí'ĩ considered her request. Having another woman present might indeed ease the white woman's fears, and Shíí'ĩ's language skills could prove useful. "Yes," he decided, "but stay close and follow my lead." Moments later, they rode out of the village, Naugai's disapproving gaze following them until they disappeared around the bend in the canyon. The journey to the spring took less time on horseback, and as they approached, Shíí'ĩ signaled for Shíí'ĩ to wait while he assessed the situation. The white woman, Sarah she had called herself, sat beside the pool, bathing her sick child's face with water. The other children huddled close, watching the water ripple with exhausted fascination. Shíí'ĩ dismounted and approached slowly, making enough noise that he wouldn't startle them. The older girl saw him first, her eyes widening as she clutched her brother's shoulder. "You have returned," Sarah said, looking up with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I bring horses," Shíí'ĩ said, gesturing behind him, "and my sister, who speaks your words better than I." Shíí'ĩ stepped forward, offering a tentative smile. "Hello," she said in careful English. "I am Shíí'ĩ. It means beautiful in your language." The older girl, Emma, Shíí'ĩ recalled, studied Shíí'ĩ with cautious interest, while the boy half hid behind his mother. "The little one still has fever?" Shíí'ĩ asked, nodding toward the child in Sarah's arms. "Yes," Sarah replied. The water helped a little, but she's still very warm. Shíí'į removed the small pouch from his belt and handed it to Kijoni. My grandmother sent medicine. My sister will show you how to use it. Kijoni knelt beside Sarah, opening the pouch to reveal dried herbs. We make tea, she explained, taking a small handful and placing it in a clay cup she produced from her belt pouch. For the fever. While Kijoni prepared the herbal remedy, Shíí'ĩ brought the horses closer. When the child drinks the medicine, we will go. It is not safe here. Not safe. Sarah looked up sharply. Are there others, like my father, searching? Shíí'ĩ noted her specific fear. I have seen no other whites, but this place is known to hunting parties, and the sun grows hot. He gestured to the sparse shade around the spring. My village has shelter, food, more medicine. Sarah hesitated, clearly weighing her limited options. Your people, will they accept us? My grandmother has agreed, Shíí'ĩ said simply, not mentioning Naogai's opposition or the potential complications of bringing whites into their sanctuary. She is healer. She will help the small one. The boy, Thomas, had emerged from behind his mother and was staring wide-eyed at Shíí'ĩ's horse. Is that your horse? He asked, his childish curiosity momentarily overcoming his fear. Yes, Shíí'ĩ replied, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly at the boy's fascination. His name is Biagi, Little One, though he has grown big now. Can I touch him? Thomas asked, then quickly looked to his mother for permission. Sarah hesitated, then nodded cautiously. Be gentle, Thomas. Shíí'ĩ beckoned the boy closer. He is gentle horse, will not hurt you. Thomas approached carefully, reaching out a small hand to stroke the horse's nose. His face lit with wonder when the animal nickered softly and lowered its head for more attention. He likes you, Shíí'ĩ said, watching the boy's delight. Meanwhile, Kijoni had finished preparing the herbal tea and was helping Sarah coax a few sips into the feverish child. She must drink more later, Kijoni explained, but this will help now. Once Rose had taken enough of the medicine, Shíí'ĩ helped Sarah onto the horse with the travois, carefully arranging a blanket to create shade for her and the sick child. Thomas, no longer quite so fearful, eagerly accepted Shíí'ĩ's offer to ride on Biagi. Emma, still wary, chose to ride with Kijoni. As they prepared to leave, Sarah looked back at the spring. Thank you, she said quietly. We would have died here without your help. Shíí'ĩ acknowledged her words with a slight nod. The eagle brought me here, he said again, as if that explained everything. And perhaps in his world it did. They set off at a gentle pace, Shíí'ĩ leading Biagi on foot while Kijoni rode alongside the travois, keeping a watchful eye on Sarah and Rose. The journey through the twisting canyons took most of the morning, the red rock walls rising higher around them as they followed a path invisible to untrained eyes. Emma, gradually growing more comfortable with Kijoni, began to ask cautious questions. How many people live in your village? Do you have school? What do you eat? Kijoni answered patiently, explaining their way of life in simple terms. We are not many, 5 hands of families, she said, spreading her fingers to illustrate. Children learn from mothers, fathers, grandparents, not like mission school I went to once. We eat what the land gives, deer, rabbit, plants, seeds. Thomas, riding proudly atop Biagi, bombarded Shíí'ĩ with questions about horses and hunting, his earlier fear apparently forgotten in the excitement of this new adventure. Shíí'ĩ answered with patience, occasionally demonstrating a bird call or pointing out tracks in the sandy soil. Sarah remained largely silent during the journey, dividing her attention between Rose's condition and their surroundings. Occasionally, Shíí'ĩ would catch her watching him with an expression that mingled gratitude with lingering suspicion, understandable, given what most white settlers believed about his people. As they rounded the final bend in the canyon, the village came into view. Sarah gasped softly, her grip tightening on Rose. This is your home. she asked, taking in the collection of dome-shaped wiki-ups, the cooking fires, the children playing, the women working at various tasks. Yes, Shíí'į replied. Our home for many generations. Their arrival caused an immediate stir. Children stopped their games to stare. Women paused in their work, and warriors moved subtly closer, hands never far from weapons. Naogai stood with arms crossed, his disapproval radiating like heat from sun-baked stones. Shíí'ĩ raised a hand in greeting and reassurance to his people as he led the small procession toward the center of the village. N'ju emerged. From her wiki-up, her ancient face impassive as she surveyed the newcomers. "Bring the sick one to me," she commanded in their language, gesturing toward her dwelling. Kijoni, translated for Sarah as Shíí'ĩ, carefully lifted Rose from the travois. "My grandmother will help your daughter. She is very wise in healing ways." Fear flashed across Sarah's face as Shíí'ĩ took her child. "I want to stay with her," she said quickly, sliding from the horse despite her exhaustion. "Of course," Kijoni assured her. "Mothers always stay with sick children." Emma and Thomas remained on their horses, suddenly shy again in the face of so many curious stares. Kijoni noticed their discomfort and spoke quietly to a few of the women. Soon, 2 children about Emma's age approached, offering tentative smiles. "They will show your children where to get water and food," Kijoni explained to Sarah. "They will be safe." Sarah looked torn, unwilling to let her older children out of her sight, but equally unwilling to leave Rose. "I will watch over them," Shíí'ĩ promised, understanding her concern. "No harm will come to them here." Something in his steady gaze seemed to reassure her. Sarah nodded, then turned to Emma. "Stay together and mind your manners," she instructed, trying to sound calm for their sake. "I'll be with Rose in that house," she gestured to N'ju's wiki-up. Emma, always the responsible one, took Thomas's hand as they were helped down from the horses. "Yes, Mama," she said solemnly, though her eyes betrayed her curiosity about this strange new place. Inside N'ju's dwelling, the air was cool and fragrant with drying herbs and burning sage. The old woman had already prepared a small bed of soft furs and was grinding something in a stone mortar. She looked up as Shíí'ĩ entered with Rose in his arms, Sarah close behind. "Place her here," N'ju directed in their language, which Kijoni translated. Shíí'ĩ carefully laid the feverish child on the furs. Rose whimpered softly, but didn't wake. Sarah immediately knelt beside her, brushing damp curls from her daughter's forehead. N'ju studied Rose for a long moment, her dark eyes taking in the child's flushed cheeks and labored breathing. Then she looked at Sarah, really looked at her, as if seeing beyond the dirt and exhaustion to something deeper. "This one has suffered," she said to Shíí'ĩ in their language. "Not just from the desert, she carries old wounds." "She fled from her father," Shíí'ĩ replied quietly. "I believe he did her harm." N'ju nodded, unsurprised. "The land welcomes those who seek refuge," she said, "as we once did, long ago." She turned back to her mortar and pestle, adding more herbs to her mixture. Kijoni didn't translate this exchange, instead helping Sarah clean Rose's face and arms with cool water from a clay pot. "My grandmother makes strong medicine," she assured Sarah. "Many children get well with her help." Outside, voices rose in what sounded like argument. Shíí'ĩ moved to the entrance of the wiki-up, pushing aside the covering to see Naogai addressing several of the council elders, gesturing emphatically toward N'ju's dwelling. They cannot stay," Naogai was saying, his voice carrying clearly. "The woman's people will come looking for her. They will find our sanctuary, and then what? We have seen what happens when whites discover our villages." "The children need care," countered an older man, one of the respected council members. "We cannot send them back into the desert. Then we take them to the trading post at San Carlos when the small one is stronger," Naogai insisted. "Let their own kind deal with them." She stepped fully outside, drawing all eyes to him. "I have brought them under my protection," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "The eagle guided me to them. Would you question the ways of our ancestors, cousin?" Naugai's face tightened. I question bringing danger to our people for the sake of white children whose fathers and brothers hunt us like animals. These children have no father, Shíí'į replied evenly, and the mother fled from her own father's cruelty. They are not our enemies. All whites become our enemies eventually, Naugai countered bitterly. They cannot help themselves. It is their nature to take what is not theirs. One of the older women spoke up then, her voice weathered by age. The girl child has my grandson's eyes, she said, referring to Emma. The same curiosity, the same caution. Children are children, Naugai, regardless of their skin. The debate might have continued, but at that moment, Emma and Thomas emerged. From between two wiki-ups, led by their young guides, they stopped short at the sight of the gathered adults, clearly sensing the tension. Thomas's hand found Emma's, his earlier bravado fading. The sight of the children, dusty, thin, and obviously frightened, despite their efforts to appear brave, seemed to soften even Naugai's expression momentarily. He looked away, his jaw working. One of the elders stepped forward, an old man whose face was deeply lined by sun and time. They will stay until the small one is healed, he declared. Then the council will decide what is to be done. It was a compromise that satisfied no one entirely, but it ended the immediate conflict. The gathering dispersed, though Naugai cast one final dark look at Shíí'į before stalking away toward the horse corral. Emma approached Shíí'ĩ cautiously. "Is our mother inside?" she asked, her chin lifted in an attempt to appear unafraid. "With Rose?" "Yes," Shíí'ĩ replied. "Your sister sleeps now. The grandmother gives medicine." Relief softened Emma's features. "Is Rose going to be all right?" Shíí'ĩ considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "The grandmother is very wise in healing. If anyone can help your sister, it is her." Thomas tugged at his sister's hand. "Emma, they have horses, lots of them, and the boys said they might show me how to ride properly tomorrow if we stay." Emma hushed him, though her own eyes betrayed interest in their surroundings. "We won't be staying, Thomas," she whispered, though not quietly enough to escape Shíí'į's hearing. "Once Rose is better, we'll go somewhere." Shíí'ĩ pretended not to hear, instead gesturing toward Nju's wiki-up. "You can see your mother now, but the small one needs quiet to heal." The children nodded solemnly and ducked past him into the dwelling. Shíí'ĩ remained outside, watching as the normal rhythms of village life gradually resumed around him. Women returned to their cooking and weaving, men to their crafting and discussions, children to their games, though all kept casting curious glances toward Nju's wiki-up. His decision to bring the white family here would have consequences. He had no illusions about that. But as he looked toward the high canyon walls, where an eagle soared on the thermals, Shíí'ĩ felt a deep certainty that he had followed the right path. Why this certainty existed, what purpose these strangers might serve in their lives, he could not yet say. But like the eagle, he would trust the currents that could not be seen, only felt. Sarah woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The dome-shaped dwelling was dim, lit only by filtered sunlight and the soft glow of embers in a small central fire pit. Rose lay beside her on a bed of soft furs, her breathing easier than it had been the day before, her small face no longer flushed with fever. Relief washed over Sarah as she gently placed a hand on her daughter's forehead, cool to the touch. The medicine bundle that Nju had prepared, a small deerskin pouch filled with herbs and tied with sinew, lay near Rose's pillow, its earthy scent permeating the air. "She sleeps peacefully now," came a voice from the shadows. Nju sat, cross-legged on the opposite side of the fire pit, her ancient fingers working methodically as she ground something in a stone mortar. The fever spirits have gone. Kijoni wasn't present to translate, but the old woman's meaning was clear enough from her gestures toward Rose. Sarah nodded gratefully. "Thank you," she said, touching her heart to convey her gratitude. "Thank you for saving my daughter. Zhu's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. She set aside her work and moved with surprising agility to kneel beside Rose, placing gnarled fingers on the child's wrist, then chest, feeling the steady rhythm of her heart. "Strong," Zhu said in heavily accented English, one of the few words she seemed to know. "Girl strong." Sarah blinked back sudden tears. After so many months of feeling powerless to protect her children, of watching them grow thinner and more fearful under her father's rule, the simple declaration of her daughter's strength struck her deeply. "Where are my other children?" Sarah asked, miming eating and looking around questioningly. Zhu understood, pointing toward the entrance of the wickiup and making a motion like pouring something. "Food," she said, "with Kijoni." Carefully, tucking the blanket around Rose, Sarah rose to her feet, ducking to avoid the low ceiling of the dwelling. Her muscles protested after days of walking, followed by hours of sitting vigil beside Rose, but the pain was secondary to her need to check on Emma and Thomas. Outside, the morning sun bathed the village in golden light. Women moved about their daily tasks, grinding corn, weaving baskets, tending to cooking fires. Children played a game involving small carved figures and painted stones, their laughter a universal sound that transcended language. Several people paused in their activities to watch Sarah emerge, their expressions ranging from curiosity to wariness. Sarah spotted Emma and Thomas sitting with Kijoni near one of the cooking fires. Thomas was gesturing animatedly as he spoke, to a boy about his age, seemingly unconcerned by the language barrier, while Emma helped Kijoni stir something in a clay pot. The sight of them, safe, engaged, almost at ease, loosened a knot of tension in Sarah's chest. "Mama!" Thomas called, spotting her. He jumped up and ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Is Rose better?" Kijoni said the medicine was working. "Yes, she's much better," Sarah assured him, smoothing his tousled hair. "Her fever is gone. She's still sleeping." Emma approached more sedately, her eyes searching Sarah's face. "Really better, not just a little." "Really better," Sarah confirmed, pulling her daughter into a brief embrace. "And Zhu's medicine worked wonders." Relief softened Emma's serious expression. "Good, we were worried." Kijoni joined them, offering Sarah a wooden bowl filled with a hearty stew of corn, beans, and what smelled like venison. "You must eat," she said, "to keep strength." Sarah accepted the bowl gratefully, suddenly aware of her gnawing hunger. "Thank you for everything, for helping with the children, for translating." Kijoni shrugged, looking pleased. "It is good to speak English." Again, at mission school, they beat children who spoke our language. Here no one speaks English except my brother. The casual mention of such cruelty reminded Sarah of the broader world beyond this canyon, a world where her own people treated Kijonis with systematic brutality, where the peaceful scene around her was under constant threat. Shame colored her gratitude. "I'm sorry," Sarah said inadequately. "That's terrible." Kijoni tilted her head, studying Sarah with curious eyes. "Why sorry? You did not beat me." Before Sarah could respond, movement near the canyon entrance caught her attention. A group of men on horseback was returning to the village, Shíí'į among them. They carried several rabbits and what appeared to be a young deer. The morning's hunt had been successful. As the hunters dismounted, the village came alive with activity. Women approached to take the game, children gathered to hear tales of the hunt, and elders nodded approval at the bounty. Shíí'į spoke briefly with an older man, then scanned the village until his eyes found Sarah. He said something to Naugai, who scowled but nodded grudgingly, then made his way toward them. "The small one is better?" he asked without preamble, his dark eyes moving from Sarah to the wickiup where Rose still slept. "Yes," Sarah replied. "The fever is gone. I don't know how to thank your grandmother properly." A flicker of satisfaction crossed Shíí'į's face. She is skilled healer, many seasons of knowledge. He glanced at Thomas and Emma, who were watching him with undisguised fascination. "The children are comfortable?" "They seem to be adapting remarkably well," Sarah admitted. watching as Thomas returned to his new friend. Their language barrier. Apparently no obstacle to their game. Children are resilient, I suppose. Yes, she agreed. They see with clear eyes, not clouded by... He searched for the word stories. Bad stories adults tell. The observation was surprisingly perceptive, highlighting the innocence with which Thomas and Emma approached. Their situation compared to Sarah's own fear-tinged gratitude. Stories indeed, tales of savage Indians that settlers told around fires, stories her father had spat along with tobacco juice as he cleaned his rifle, stories that, in this peaceful canyon, seemed not just wrong, but malicious. The council wishes to speak with you, Shíí'į continued, gesturing toward a group of older men gathered under the shade of a cottonwood tree. About what comes next. Anxiety fluttered in Sarah's chest. What comes next? Where you will go when the small one is strong enough to travel, Shíí'į clarified. Some think you should go to trading post at San Carlos. Others, he hesitated, have different thoughts. And what do you think? Sarah asked, meeting his gaze directly. Something flickered in Shíí'į's eyes, an emotion Sarah couldn't quite identify. I think you are not safe among your own people if you run from them, he said carefully. But council must decide if you can stay longer. The prospect of being sent away, back into a world where her father might still be searching for them, sent a chill through Sarah despite the warm morning sun. But what alternative was there? She could hardly expect this band of Apaches to shelter a white woman and her children indefinitely, not when her very presence might endanger them. I understand, she said, straightening her shoulders. I'll speak. With them. Kijoni touched her arm lightly. I will come, to help with words. Sarah nodded gratefully, then turned to Emma. Stay with Thomas and keep an eye on Rose. I need to talk with the elders. Emma's face took on the solemn, too old expression that always broke Sarah's heart a little. Yes, Mama, what will you tell them? What indeed? That she had nowhere to go, that returning to white society meant risking her father finding them, that in less than 2 days she had come to feel safer among these supposed savages than among her own kind. The truth, Sarah said finally. It's all I have to offer. The Council of Elders had positioned themselves in a loose circle under the cottonwood tree, some seated on woven mats, others on stones worn smooth by generations of such gatherings. They watched Sarah's approach with the impassive dignity that seemed characteristic of the older tribe members, their weathered faces revealing nothing of their thoughts. Shíí'į introduced each man by name, which Kijoni translated along with their relationship to the tribe. This one was father of 3 warriors. That one had led hunting parties for 30 summers. Another was keeper of the tribe's oral history. Sarah nodded respectfully to each, aware that her future and her children's rested in their hands. Sit, invited the oldest man, who had been introduced as Hastian, the most respected voice on the council. He gestured to an empty space in their circle. Sarah sat cross-legged on the ground, arranging her tattered skirts as best she could, acutely conscious of her disheveled appearance. Kijoni knelt beside her, prepared to translate. We have questions, Hastian said through Kijoni. You will answer with truth. Yes, Sarah agreed. I will speak only truth. The questioning began simply enough. Her name, the ages of her children, where she had come from. Then came more probing inquiries. Why had she fled her father? Were others searching for her? Did she have family elsewhere who might shelter her? Sarah answered each question directly, explaining her husband's death, her father's escalating abuse, and her desperate flight into the desert. When asked about other family, she shook her head. My mother died when I was young. My husband's family is in the east, too far to reach. I have nowhere to go where my father cannot find me. This admission caused a stir among the elders. Now Guy, who stood at the edge of the gathering, stepped forward. Then her father will search, he said sharply in Apache, which Kijoni translated reluctantly. He will bring soldiers. They will find our canyon. My father is one man, Sarah countered when Kijoni had translated. A drunk who can barely stay on a horse when the whiskey is in him. He has no influence with the military. All white men have influence with soldiers when Indians are concerned, Naugai retorted bitterly. Sarah couldn't deny the truth in this. Even the most disreputable white settler could stir up a military response with claims of Indian depredations, real or imagined. Hastien raised a hand, silencing further debate. "The woman came to our land by chance," he said. "The eagle guided our chief to her. These are not small things." He turned his penetrating gaze to Sarah. "If you could choose, what would you do?" The question caught Sarah off guard. Choice had been a luxury long denied her, first by circumstance, then by her, father's control, and finally by desperate necessity. What would she choose if choice were possible? "I would find a safe place for my children," she said slowly, "somewhere they could grow up without fear. I would work, contribute, earn our keep however I could." She hesitated, then added, "If such a place existed," Hastien nodded thoughtfully, "and if that place were here, among people not your own." A murmur ran through the gathered elders. Naugai made a sharp exclamation that needed no translation to convey his opposition. Even Shíí'į looked surprised by the elder's question. Sarah considered her answer carefully. "My children and I owe our lives to your people. I would be grateful for any shelter you might offer, for as long as you deemed appropriate. I have skills. I can sow, cook, tend gardens. I learn quickly." She met Hastien's gaze directly. "But I understand if that is not possible. I would not bring danger to those who saved us." Her words were met with thoughtful silence. The elders exchanged glances, some nodding slightly, others frowning in consideration. Finally, Hastien spoke again. "We will discuss this matter further," he said. "Until then, you and your children may rest here. When the small one is stronger, we will decide." It wasn't the answer Sarah had hoped for, but it was better than immediate dismissal. She nodded her acceptance and rose to leave, but Shíí'ì's voice stopped her. "There is another matter," he said, addressing the council rather than Sarah. "The woman and her children have no protection among our people or her own. They are, what is the word, Kijoni? Vulnerable," his sister supplied. "Yes, vulnerable," Shíí'ì continued. "In our ways, those without family must be taken into a family, given a place in the circle." Hastien's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting, son of my brother?" Shíí'ì straightened, his expression resolute. "I am suggesting that until the council decides their fate, they should be under my protection, formally." "You have no wife," one of the other elders pointed out. "It is not proper for a single man to shelter a woman with children." "Then perhaps," Shíí'ì said, his voice steady despite the audacity of what he was about to propose, "she should become my wife." The words hung in the air like summer lightning, shocking in their unexpectedness. Sarah stared at him, certain she had misunderstood or that Kijoni had translated incorrectly. But the stunned expressions of the council members confirmed she had heard correctly. Naugai broke the silence with a bark of incredulous laughter. "Have you lost your mind, cousin? Take a white woman as wife, the mother of white children. You would taint the bloodline of chiefs for the sake of, what? Misplaced compassion. I would honor our traditions of protection and hospitality," Shíí'ì replied evenly, "and strengthen our band with new members. She is not of our people." Naugai protested. "Neither was your own grandmother," Shíí'ì countered, "yet she was welcomed from the Navajo and became one of us. Our strength has always come from our ability to adopt those who would join us in good faith." The elders were murmuring among themselves now, some nodding thoughtfully, others frowning in disapproval. Sarah remained frozen in place, unable to fully process what was happening. Marriage? To this man she barely knew. The very idea was so unexpected, so outside her understanding of her situation, that she could form no coherent response. Hastien finally raised his hand for silence. This is a serious matter that cannot be decided hastily, he said. Shíí'į, you will speak with the woman privately about this proposal. She must understand what it would mean for her children, for our people. Then, if she is willing, the council will consider your request. Shíí'į nodded his acceptance of these terms, his expression betraying nothing of his thoughts. Go now, Hestian instructed Sarah. Think on what has been said here. We will speak again. In a daze, Sarah rose and walked away from the council, Shíí'į at her side. Only when they were out of earshot did the younger woman speak. My brother has surprised everyone, she said, her voice a mix of awe and concern. This has never happened before, a chief taking a white wife. He can't be serious, Sarah said, finding her voice at last. We've known each other less than 2 days. He knows nothing about me. He knows you are brave, Shíí'ĩ replied simply. He knows you would die for your children. These are things a man looks for in a wife. But surely he doesn't want to marry me, Sarah protested. This is just some kind of formal arrangement, isn't it? A way to give us tribal protection? Shíí'ĩ considered this. Yes and no. Marriage is serious to our people. If you became his wife, you and your children would be part of our band, under his protection. Your children would be his children, but... She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. It would be a real marriage, not just words. The implication was clear, sending a flush of heat to Sarah's cheeks. She hadn't considered the possibility of another man in her life after John died. Certainly not an Apache Chief she had met just days ago, regardless of how grateful she was for his help. I need to check on Rose, Sarah said abruptly, needing space to think. And the other children. Shíí'ĩ nodded, understanding in her eyes. Of course. But Sarah, she touched Sarah's arm lightly. My brother is a good man, kind to children, respected by our people. If you must have a husband, you could find worse. With that pragmatic assessment, she left Sarah standing alone in the middle of the village, surrounded by people who were strangers in every way that mattered, yet who had shown her more kindness in 2 days than her own father had in years. Rose was awake when Sarah returned to Nju's wickiup, sitting up on the furs and solemnly accepting spoonfuls of broth from the old healer. Her eyes brightened at the sight of her mother. "Mama!" she called, holding out her arms. "The nice lady gave me soup!" Relief at seeing her youngest so improved overwhelmed Sarah's confusion about Shíí'į's proposal. She gathered Rose into her arms, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the sturdy beat of her heart. "Are you feeling better, my love?" she asked, pressing a kiss to Rose's forehead. Rose nodded vigorously. "All better. Can I go play with Emma and Thomas? The lady said there are children here." "Soon," Sarah promised, "when you're a little stronger." Nju watched their interaction with knowing eyes, nodding approval at Rose's improved condition. She said something in Apache, gesturing toward the medicine bundle and then to the child. "I think she wants you to keep using the medicine," Sarah guessed, and Nju nodded in confirmation. "Strong," the old woman repeated, patting Rose's cheek. "Good girl." Rose beamed at the praise, then turned curious eyes to Sarah. "Mama, are we going to stay here?" "Thomas said we might. He wants to learn to ride horses." The innocent question brought Sarah's dilemma rushing back. Stay here, as Shíí'į's wife. The very idea was outlandish, unprecedented, and yet what were her alternatives? Return to white society where her father might find them. Try to make it to California alone, a journey that had killed stronger parties than hers? "I don't know yet, sweetheart," Sarah answered honestly. "We'll see." Rose seemed satisfied with this non-answer and returned to her broth, her appetite a heartening sign of recovery. Sarah sat beside her, mechanically helping her eat, while her mind raced through possibilities, each seeming more impossible than the last. Outside, she could hear the normal sounds of village life continuing, children playing, women calling to one another, the rhythmic sound of someone working leather. Life went on, unconcerned with her personal crisis. And somewhere in that village, Shíí'į was waiting for her answer to a proposal she never could have imagined receiving. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the canyon floor as Sarah sat alone beside the small stream that ran through the village. Rose was resting comfortably under Nju's watchful eye, while Emma and Thomas had been thoroughly integrated into the children's games, their laughter occasionally rising above the general sounds of village life. It gave Sarah a rare moment of solitude to consider her impossible situation. A movement nearby drew her attention. Shíí'į approached, then paused at a respectful distance, silently asking permission to join her. When Sarah nodded, he sat beside her on a flat rock, leaving appropriate space between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The stream bubbled over smooth stones, creating a gentle music that filled the silence. Finally, Shíí'ĩ reached into a small pouch at his belt and withdrew something that caught the sunlight. A silver coin strung on a leather thong. "For you," he said simply, holding it out. "Protection." Sarah hesitated, then accepted the offering. The coin was old, Spanish perhaps, with unfamiliar markings. A hole had been carefully punched near the edge for the leather cord. "It's beautiful," she said, turning it over in her palm. "But I don't understand." "My father gave to my mother when they married," Shíí'ĩ explained. "Silver turns black when danger comes. Warning." He pointed to the coin, then to his eyes. "To see what cannot be seen." Sarah stared at the coin, understanding that this was no trivial gift. "Why would you offer marriage to a stranger?" she asked directly. "To a white woman with 3 children not your own?" Shíí'ĩ considered her question seriously. "The eagle led me to you," he said, as if this explained everything. When Sarah's expression remained questioning, he continued. "I have no wife. Since Nijoni died 5 winters ago. No children." A shadow of old grief crossed his face. "A chief should have family, children to teach. But surely there are women in your tribe who would—" "Yes," he interrupted. "But the eagle did not lead me to them." His gaze was direct, unflinching. "You need protection. Your children need father. I need family. Simple." There was a stark pragmatism to his reasoning that Sarah couldn't deny. Still, the idea remained. "Foreign, almost unthinkable. If I agreed," she said carefully, "what would it mean? For my children. They become part of tribe. Learn our ways, but keep your ways too. Both, not one only." Shíí'ĩ made a gesture of weaving with his hands. "Together like basket. And would they be safe? Accepted? I am chief," he said simply. "My children are my children, no matter how they come to me." He paused, then added, "Not all will welcome at first. Naugai and others will take time. But most will accept." Sarah twisted the leather cord between her fingers, considering. "And me? What would be expected? You would be wife of chief. Learn our ways, help with women's work, keep your own faith." He gestured toward the small cross that hung alongside her locket. "In time, perhaps learn healing from grandmother. She sees something in you." The offer was more generous than Sarah could have imagined. No demands that she abandon her identity, her beliefs, only that she join her life to his, become part of his people. "Why?" she asked again, needing to understand. "Why would you do this?" Shíí'ĩ was silent for a long moment, looking out across the canyon. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "In your eyes I see strength. In your arms holding sick child, I see love. In your words to counsel, I hear truth." He met her gaze directly. "These are things a man looks for in mother of his children." The simplicity of his answer struck Sarah deeply. Not pity, not mere kindness, but genuine respect. When was the last time a man had looked at her and seen strength rather than weakness to be controlled? "I don't know," she said honestly. "It's, so sudden, so unexpected," Shíí'ĩ nodded, unsurprised by her hesitation. "Think until morning," he suggested. "Ask your heart what is best for children." He rose to his feet with fluid grace. "I will accept your answer, whatever it may be." As he turned to go, Sarah called after him. "What if I say no?" What happens to us then? Shíí'į paused, his expression solemn. Council will decide. Some want to take you to trading post when small one is stronger. He didn't need to elaborate on what that might mean, returning to white society where her father could find them. With a respectful nod, he left her to her thoughts, the silver coin cool against her palm. Sarah slipped the leather thong over her head, the coin settling alongside her locket and cross, symbols of her past, her faith, and now, perhaps, her future. Behind her, she could hear Thomas's excited voice as he returned from the horse corral, eager to tell her everything he had learned. Emma's more measured tones followed, still cautious but warming to their unexpected sanctuary. From N'Ju's wickiup came Rose's childish giggle as the old healer apparently entertained her with some game or story. Her children were healing here, not just in body, but in spirit. After months of fear under her father's roof, they were beginning to remember what safety felt like. Was that not worth any price? Dawn broke over the canyon in ribbons of gold and crimson, painting the sandstone walls with fire. Sarah had barely slept, her mind circling endlessly around the decision before her. By the time the first rays of sunlight filtered into N'Ju's wickiup, she had reached her answer, not with certainty, but with the clear-eyed pragmatism that had helped her survive thus far. Rose was almost fully recovered, her natural exuberance returning as she chatted with N'Ju in a mix of English words and attempted Apache phrases. The old woman seemed equally charmed by the child, teaching her simple words with remarkable patience. When Kijoni arrived with breakfast, a porridge of ground corn sweetened with wild honey, Sarah asked her to find Shíí'į. "You have decided?" Kijoni asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. Sarah nodded, absently touching the silver coin that now hung alongside her locket. "Yes, I need to speak with him. He is with the elders," Kijoni said. "I will bring him when their council ends." While waiting, Sarah gathered Emma and Thomas, taking them to a quiet spot near the stream. They deserved to understand what might happen, to have some voice in a decision that would reshape their lives. "There's something important we need to discuss," Sarah began, studying their faces, Thomas eager and open, Emma watchful and serious. "Chief Shíí'į has asked me to marry him." Thomas's eyes widened. "Really? Would that make him our new papa?" The innocent question pierced Sarah's heart. "In a way," she answered carefully. "He would be your stepfather. We would become part of his tribe. Would we stay here forever?" Emma asked, the practical one as always. "I don't know about forever," Sarah admitted, "but for now, yes, we would live here in the village." Thomas could barely contain his excitement. "I could learn to ride horses and hunt. The boys showed me their bows yesterday." Emma was more hesitant. "But he's an Indian, Mama, and we're not. What about Papa? Won't we be forgetting him?" Sarah pulled her daughter close. "We will never forget your father, Emma. No. One can replace him in our hearts." She touched the locket at her throat. "But your father would want us to be safe, to have a home." "Do you love him?" Emma asked bluntly. "Like you loved Papa?" The question gave Sarah pause. "No," she answered honestly. "I don't know him well enough for that. But I respect him. He's been kind to us when we had nowhere else to go. Love might come later." Emma considered this. "Grandfather said Indians are savages." "Your grandfather was wrong about many things," Sarah said firmly. "You've seen this village, these people. Are they savages?" Both children shook their heads. "What will happen if you say no?" Emma asked perceptively. "Then we'll likely be taken to the trading post at San Carlos when Rose is stronger. From there, I don't know. Find work somewhere, try to make a new life." "Where grandfather might find us?" Thomas asked, fear shadowing his face. Sarah couldn't lie. Possibly. Silence fell as the children absorbed this. Finally, Emma spoke. "I think we should stay, Mama, at least for now. Rose is happy here, Thomas too." She managed a small smile. "And I could learn to make those pretty baskets Kijoni showed me." Relief washed through Sarah. "Are you sure?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Papa." Sarah met him at the edge of the village, her decision made. "I accept your proposal," she said simply. "For myself and my children." Something like satisfaction flickered in his dark eyes, though his expression remained composed. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be," Sarah replied honestly. "My children need safety. Your offer provides that." She met his gaze directly. "But I need to know this is not charity. I won't be a burden to you or your people. I'll work, learn your ways, contribute." "Not charity," Shíí'į assured her. "You bring strength to our band, new blood, new ideas." A faint smile touched his lips. "And 3 children, when many of our women have none. This is valuable." He reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew a pair of exquisitely beaded moccasins, the leather soft and supple, the beadwork forming intricate patterns in blue and white. "Wedding gift," he explained, offering them to her. "Made by my mother many seasons ago, for the woman I would marry." Sarah accepted the moccasins, touched by the significance of the gift. They represented not just marriage, but acceptance into his family lineage. "The ceremony will be at sunset," Shíí'ĩ continued. "Kijoni will help you prepare." As he turned to go, Sarah called after him, a sudden thought occurring. "Shíí'ĩ, what does your name mean again? In English?" He paused, looking back over his shoulder. "He who protects," he answered simply, then continued on his way, leaving Sarah to contemplate the aptness of his name and the strange path that had led her to this moment. The wedding ceremony took place as the setting sun gilded the canyon walls with amber light. The entire village gathered in a wide circle around a central fire pit where fragrant cedar and sage burned, sending spirals of aromatic smoke into the evening air. Drums beat a steady heartbeat rhythm, while elders chanted in ancient cadences that needed no translation to convey their solemnity. Sarah stood beside Shíí'ĩ, dressed in a simple deerskin dress that Kijoni and the other women had hastily prepared, her hair adorned with small white flowers. The beaded moccasins enclosed her feet, surprisingly comfortable after days of worn boots. Her children stood nearby, Rose held by Nju, Emma and Thomas wide-eyed but composed. Hastian presided over the ceremony, speaking at length in Apache. Kijoni translated quietly for Sarah, explaining the promises being made, not just between husband and wife, but between a chief and new members of his band. "He asks if you will learn our ways, respect our traditions, and help protect our people," Kijoni whispered. "I will," Sarah replied, the words feeling weightier than she had expected. Hastian nodded, then turned to Shíí'ĩ, asking similar questions about his willingness to protect and provide for Sarah and her children, to teach them the ways of the people, to defend them as his own. "I will," Shíí'ĩ answered in English, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed gathering. Nju stepped forward then, Rose still in her arms. The old woman carried a small clay pot of red ochre. With one gnarled finger, she drew a symbol on Shíí'ĩ's forehead, then on Sarah's, a design that Kijoni later explained represented unity and protection. "Now you speak promise," Kijoni instructed Sarah. "In your words, then try in ours." Sarah took a deep breath, acutely, aware of all eyes upon her. "I, Sarah Matthews, promise to honor your ways, to care for your home, to stand beside you in good times and bad. I promise to raise my children, our children, to respect both their heritages and to be worthy of your protection." She paused, then carefully recited the Apache phrases Kijoni had taught her that afternoon, a simplified version of her vows. A murmur of appreciation ran through the gathering at her attempt to speak their language. Even Naugai, standing at the edge of the circle with arms crossed, seemed grudgingly impressed. Shíí'ĩ spoke his vows next, first in Apache, then in carefully chosen English. "I take you as wife, your children as my children. My home is your home. My family is your family. What is mine is yours. I will protect with my life." The simplicity and directness of his promise brought unexpected tears to Sarah's eyes. In their brief acquaintance, she had come to recognize Shíí'ì's integrity. His words were not empty, but a solemn pledge he would honor. Hastian instructed them to join hands, then wrapped a woven sash around their wrists, binding them together. The elders approached one by one, each speaking a blessing or offering advice for their union. Finally, Nju stepped forward again, this time placing Rose directly into Shíí'ì's arms. The child studied him solemnly for a moment, then reached out to touch the eagle feather in his hair. "Pretty," she declared, breaking the ceremonial tension. Soft laughter rippled through the gathering as Shíí'ì smiled down at her. "Yes, little one," he agreed. "Pretty like you." Emma and Thomas were beckoned forward next, each receiving a blessing from Hastian and a small gift, a carved wooden horse for Thomas, a beaded hair ornament for Emma. The message was clear. They too were being welcomed into the tribe. The ceremony concluded with a shared meal, the entire village partaking of venison, corn cakes, wild berries, and other delicacies saved for special occasions. Children played while adults talked, the atmosphere gradually shifting from solemn ritual to celebration. As night fell, lanterns illuminated the central gathering space where several men began playing flutes and drums. Young women performed traditional dances, their movements graceful and precise, telling stories through gesture and rhythm. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Shíí'ì led Sarah to his wickiup, now their shared dwelling. It was larger than Nju's, with a central fire pit and sleeping areas arranged around the edges. Fresh furs and woven blankets had been prepared for the children, who would join them after the festivities ended. Standing in what was now her home, Sarah felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. Whatever came next, she had committed to this path. Shíí'ì seemed to sense her unease. "I will sleep there," he said, indicating a separate bedding area across the fire pit. "Until you're ready, no rush." The considerate gesture touched Sarah deeply. "Thank you," she said simply. From his belt, Shíí'ì removed a hunting knife in a decorated leather sheath. He offered it to her, handle first. "Another gift," he explained, "for protection. Every wife should have good knife." Sarah accepted, it testing the weight in her hand. The blade was sharp, the handle smooth from years of use. "It was my first hunting knife," Shíí'ì told her, "has taken many deer, never failed. Unlike the moccasins or the ceremony, this gift felt intensely personal, a tool of survival he had relied upon, now entrusted to her. It symbolized not just their union, but his faith in her strength. "I'll treasure it," Sarah promised, carefully setting the knife beside her few possessions. Outside, the celebration continued under a canopy of stars. But within the quiet wickiup, a tentative new beginning had taken root, not based on passion or even love, but on something equally powerful: mutual respect and shared purpose. 3 months passed, marked by the subtle shift of seasons rather than calendars. Summer's relentless heat gradually softened into autumn's more temperate embrace. The cottonwoods along the stream turned golden, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. For Sarah, time was measured in small victories and gradual adjustments. As she and her children found their place within the tribe, each morning began before dawn, joining the other women to grind corn for the day's meals, gather firewood, or tend to the small gardens hidden in protected corners of the canyon. Her hands, once soft from town life, grew calloused and strong. Her skin darkened under the desert sun, and her once fashionable dresses gave way entirely to practical deerskin clothing crafted with Kijoni's patient instruction. Emma had proven to be a quick study, her natural intelligence helping her grasp the Apache language faster than her mother. She followed Kijoni everywhere, absorbing knowledge about plants, weaving techniques, and tribal songs with a hunger that surprised even Sarah. The journal that Shíí'ì had given her, a gift, made from handcrafted paper bound in soft leather, was filled with Emma's careful observations and drawings, a blend of her old life and new. "Look, Mama," Emma said one evening, showing Sarah a page where she had recorded a tribal story alongside pressed desert flowers. Kijoni says these bloom only after the summer rains. They're used for stomach ailments. Sarah smiled, noting how her daughter's handwriting had matured along with her understanding. You're becoming quite the healer's apprentice, and Zhu will have competition soon. Emma's expression grew serious. And Zhu says knowledge must be passed down, or it dies. She says I have good hands for medicine. The easy way Emma referenced tribal wisdom, integrating it with her existing knowledge, gave Sarah hope that her children would thrive in this unexpected life. Thomas had adapted even more readily, becoming nearly inseparable from the chief's nephew, Shíí'į. Together they explored the canyon, learned to track small game, and practiced with small bows, crafted specifically for their size. Thomas returned each evening dirty, tired, and bubbling with new discoveries. Shíí'į showed me how to find water when there's no stream, he announced one day, eyes bright with excitement. You look for certain plants and dig down near them. We found water right under the ground. Even little Rose had embraced their new life wholeheartedly. At nearly 3, she chattered in a curious blend of English and Apache that sometimes required translation from both sides. The tribal elders doted on her, amused by her fearless curiosity and quick laugh. She called whenever Shíí'į returned from hunting or council meetings, her inability to pronounce his full name having become an affectionate nickname. She would run to him on sturdy legs, arms outstretched, completely unafraid of the man who now served as her father. And Shíí'į, to his credit, had stepped into the role with unexpected grace. He was patient with the children, firm but never harsh, gradually teaching them tribal ways while respecting Sarah's guidance in matters of their prior upbringing. With Sarah herself, he maintained a respectful distance, sharing their dwelling, but keeping to his promise of separate sleeping areas until she was ready for more. Their relationship had evolved into an effective partnership, if not yet a traditional marriage. They worked together to manage their household and care for the children. In the evenings, they often sat outside their wickiup, discussing the day's events or planning for future needs. Shíí'į taught Sarah about tribal governance and traditions, while she shared stories of her former life that might help him understand white settlers' ways. Increasingly, Shíí'į sought her counsel on matters affecting the tribe, particularly regarding potential interactions with white authorities. Her perspective, shaped by life in both worlds, proved valuable as tensions in the territory continued to simmer. The agent at San Carlos sent word, he told her one evening, as they sat beneath the stars. Soldiers build new fort 20 miles east. More patrols. Sarah nodded, concern tightening her chest. They're expanding their presence throughout the territory. It's not good news for free tribes. Some young men want to fight, Shíí'į admitted, his expression troubled. Now Guy speaks of joining other bands who resist. That would be suicide, Sarah said bluntly. The army won't stop until all Apache are on reservations. Fighting only gives them excuse for harsher measures. Shíí'į studied her face in the firelight. You speak hard truth. But what choice remains for people who wish to live free? The question had no easy answer, and they both knew it. Sarah reached across the space between them, briefly touching his hand, a gesture that had become more natural over time. Oh, we'll find a way, she promised, for our family, for your people. He turned his hand to clasp hers, a small intimacy that no longer seemed foreign. Our people now, he corrected gently. And Sarah realized with some surprise that he was right. Somewhere in these past months, this tribe had indeed become her people too. The tribal council gathered in solemn assembly as Shíí'į unrolled a crude map on the ground before them. Drawn on a piece of tanned deerskin, it depicted the surrounding territories. Mountain ranges, rivers, canyons, and increasingly the encroaching presence of white settlements and military outposts marked with charcoal symbols. 3 new cavalry patrols here, here, and here, Shíí'į explained, pointing to areas uncomfortably close to their canyon sanctuary. Hunter saw them 2 days ago. Sarah sat at the edge of the circle, her presence now accepted at such gatherings, though she rarely spoke unless directly addressed. The map confirmed her growing concerns. The noose around the Free Apache bands was tightening. Now Guy, who had gradually developed a grudging respect for Sarah despite his initial opposition, pointed to another area of the map. Settlers build. New ranch here, where deer come for winter water. They cut off game trail. The implications were clear. Not only was their security threatened, but also their food supply. The tribe relied heavily on hunting, supplemented by small-scale agriculture and gathered plants. Each new ranch, each new military post further restricted their traditional hunting grounds. "We should consider moving deeper into the mountains," suggested one of the older warriors. "There are hidden valleys to the north where soldiers rarely venture." This prompted a vigorous debate. Some elders favored the cautious approach of relocating, while younger warriors argued for more aggressive resistance. Now Guy, predictably, supported confrontation. "We are Apache," he declared, "not mice to hide in holes when the hawk flies overhead." Shíí'į listened to all viewpoints with the patience that had earned him respect as chief. When the arguments had circled several times, he turned to Sarah. "What knowledge do you have of these new soldiers? What is their purpose?" All eyes turned to her, and Sarah chose her words carefully. "The government in Washington has decided all Apache must be on reservations. They send soldiers to enforce this policy." She pointed to the map. "These patrols are likely searching for bands like yours that remain free." "And if they find us?" asked Hastin. "They would force you to surrender and relocate to San Carlos or another reservation." Sarah answered honestly. "Those who resist would be treated as hostiles." "We have done nothing to harm them," protested an elder. "We raid no settlements, attack no travelers." "It doesn't matter," Sarah explained gently. "In their eyes, any Apache not on a reservation is potentially dangerous, so they don't distinguish between peaceful bands and raiders." Now Guy muttered something under his breath about white men's blindness. But the truth of Sarah's words was evident to all. The council fell silent, weighing their limited options. Into this silence came an unexpected interruption. Nju, who rarely attended council meetings anymore due to her advanced age, entered the circle leaning heavily on a walking stick. Her arrival caused immediate respect, all men rising briefly until she settled on a prepared mat. "I have had a dream," she announced without preamble. 3 paths lie before us. Everyone present knew that Nju's dreams were not to be dismissed lightly. Her visions had guided the tribe through difficult times before. "The first path leads to San Carlos," she continued, her voice surprisingly strong. "I see our people, growing thin and sad, children with sickness, warriors with broken spirits." Several council members nodded grimly. The stories from the reservations confirmed this bleak picture. "The second path leads to war," Nju said. "I see blood on the rocks, our wiki-ups burning, few survivors." Now Guy shifted uncomfortably, but did not interrupt. "The third path is hidden, difficult to find," the old woman concluded. "It requires new thinking, bending like the willow, rather than standing rigid like the oak. I see our people continuing, changed but alive. Our children, growing strong in new ways." She fixed her gaze on Sarah. "The white woman's presence is no accident. The eagle that led my grandson to her was sent by the ancestors. She brings knowledge we need for this third path." The pronouncement sent a ripple through the gathering. Nju rarely spoke so directly about matters of tribal policy, preferring to advise Shíí'ĩ privately. Her public endorsement of Sarah's importance to the tribe's future carried immense weight. "What knowledge?" Naugai challenged, though his tone was respectful. "How to surrender more prettily." "Knowledge of 2 worlds," Nju replied serenely. "The snake that cannot shed its skin will die." Later that evening, as Sarah tended to the children in their wiki-up, Shíí'ĩ entered carrying something she hadn't seen in months, her Bible, salvage from the meager possessions she'd carried. Into the desert. "Grandmother says you should teach me these marks," he said, opening the book to reveal the printed words. "So I may understand papers soldiers bring." Sarah stared at him in surprise. "You want to learn to read English?" He nodded seriously. "Knowledge is weapon sharper than arrow. If I understand their words, perhaps I find this third path grandmother sees." And so began a new phase in their relationship. Each evening, after the children were asleep, Sarah taught Shíí'į the basics of reading, using the Bible because it was the only English text available to them. His intelligence made him a quick study, though the concepts of written language were entirely foreign to a culture that passed knowledge orally. In return, Shíí'į taught Sarah more of the Apache language, correcting her pronunciation with gentle patience. Their lessons brought them physically closer than they had been before, heads bent together over the book, fingers sometimes touching as they traced letters or demonstrated proper hand positions for certain Apache words. One night, as they finished a lesson by firelight, Shíí'į closed the Bible and studied Sarah's face. "You are not same woman who fell at spring," he observed. "Stronger now, Apache woman as much as white woman." The observation startled Sarah, but as she considered it, she recognized its truth. She had changed, adapted, found reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. "And you," she replied with newfound boldness, "are not the same man who found us. You bend like the willow now, seeking new paths instead of only following old ones." Shíí'į's rare smile transformed his face. "Together, we find third path," he said, and for the first time he reached for her hand deliberately, not in comfort or reassurance, but with the quiet desire of a man for his wife. Sarah did not pull away. The trading party returned at dusk. 6 warriors who had ventured to a small Mexican settlement across the border to exchange furs and crafts for supplies the tribe couldn't produce themselves. Their arrival should have been cause for celebration. Such journeys were increasingly dangerous, with military patrols scouring the territory. Instead, the grim expressions on the men's faces sent a ripple of unease through the village. Sarah was helping Kijoni prepare the evening meal when the commotion drew them from their tasks. Shíí'ĩ was already striding toward the returning and party, his posture alert to the tension radiating from the men. "What happened?" he demanded as the tribe gathered around. The lead trader, a weathered man named Senako, dismounted wearily. "We traded well," he reported, gesturing to the packs laden with coffee, sugar, metal tools and ammunition. "But we bring troubling news from across the border." From his saddlebag, Senako withdrew a folded paper, handling it gingerly as if it might bite. He passed it to Shíí'ĩ, who examined it with the reading skills Sarah had been teaching him, his expression darkening with each word. "What is it?" Naugai demanded, unable to read the English text. Shíí'ĩ looked up, his eyes finding Sarah in the crowd. "Come," he said simply. Sarah moved forward, aware of the tribe's attention focused on her. When Shíí'ĩ handed her the paper, she immediately recognized it for what it was, a wanted poster. Her heart froze as she saw her own name in bold print, along with a crude but recognizable sketch of her face. "Missing woman and children," the poster declared. Mrs. Sarah Matthews and her 3 children, Emma, 10, Thomas, 7, and Rose, 3, believed kidnapped by hostile Apaches from the Arizona Territory in June. The children's grandfather, respected businessman Jeremiah Matthews, offers $200 reward for information leading to their safe return. Below this was a detailed description of Sarah and the children, including what they were last seen wearing. The poster concluded with instructions to report any sightings to military authorities at Fort Grant or the Indian Agency at San Carlos. "Where did you get this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Posted in every trading post from here to Nogales," Senako replied grimly. "White men asking questions, showing this paper, even to Mexicans." Naogai cursed softly. Your father searches for you still, as I warned. Not just my father, Sarah said, her finger tracing the words. He's involved the military, claiming we were kidnapped. The implications were clear to everyone. This was no longer about one angry man searching for his daughter. This was now an official matter involving the U.S. Army, who would view the tribe's harboring of Sarah and her children as a hostile act, justification for whatever force they deemed necessary. We didn't kidnap you, Kijoni said, stating the obvious with indignation. You came to us for help. The truth doesn't matter, Sarah replied bitterly. My father has spun his tale, and they've believed him. A respectable white businessman versus savage Apaches. They'll take his word without question. Hustian stepped forward, his aged face grave. This changes our standing with the white authorities. Before, we were merely a band avoiding reservation life. Now, they will see us as kidnappers, hostage takers. Murmurs of agreement and concern rippled through the gathering. Several people looked at Sarah with newly wary eyes, as if her presence had suddenly become dangerous, rather than simply unusual. I should leave, Sarah said, folding the poster with trembling hands. Take my children and surrender at Fort Grant. Explain the truth. And then what? She asked quietly. Your father reclaims you as his white man's law. Husband's death gives father authority over widow and children. You told me this yourself. He was right. In white society, without John's protection, Sarah had few legal rights against her father's claims, especially with no witnesses to his abuse besides her children, whose testimony would be dismissed as coerced by their Apache captors. What choice do we have? Sarah asked, desperation edging her voice. If soldiers come looking for us, everyone here will suffer. Now Guy, who had been studying the poster over Sarah's shoulder, surprised everyone by speaking in her defense. She is tribe now, wife of our chief, mother to our children. We do not surrender our own to enemies. His unexpected support momentarily silenced the crowd. Over the months, Naogai had moved from open hostility toward Sarah to grudging acceptance, but this was the first time he had explicitly claimed her as one of their own. Shíí'į nodded to his cousin, acknowledging the significant gesture, then addressed the tribe. Council will meet tonight. This concerns all. Until then, continue preparations for the autumn hunt. Show no fear to our children. As the crowd dispersed, he turned to Sarah, taking the poster from her hands and refolding it carefully. Come, we talk privately. In their wickiup, safely out. Of earshot, Sarah finally gave voice to her fear. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. I've put everyone in danger. You did not create this danger, Shíí'į corrected firmly. Your father did, and now we face it together as family. But what can we do? They won't stop looking, not with an official search underway. Shíí'į was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful rather than defeated. Perhaps, he said finally, it is time to consider grandmother's third path. The council meeting lasted until the moon reached its zenith, voices rising and falling as various options were debated. Sarah sat silently through most of it, acutely aware that her presence was both the cause of their predicament and necessary for its resolution. Emma remained beside her, old enough now to understand the gravity of the situation and determined to be part of any decision affecting her family. The Mexican territories, argued one elder. We have kin who crossed the border years ago. They live free there for now, countered another, but the Mexicans hunt Apache too, and the border means nothing to American soldiers in pursuit. We could split the band, suggested a younger warrior. Small groups travel easier, attract less attention, reunite when safe. Naogai shook his head. Divided, we are weaker. The strength of the wolf is in the pack. As the debate continued in circles, a scout burst into the gathering, his expression urgent. Riders approaching from the east, 6 men, armed. The news electrified the council. Warriors immediately rose, reaching for weapons. How far? Shíí'į demanded. 2 hours, maybe less. They follow the stream. Shíí'į issued rapid orders, his authority unquestioned in this moment of crisis. Women and children to the upper caves, warriors to defensive positions, no fires, no noise. As the tribe mobilized with practiced efficiency, Sarah grabbed Shíí'ì's arm. "Let me speak to them. If they're searching for us, I can explain." "Too dangerous," he cut her off. "If your father is with them, then I need to face him," Sarah insisted. "This has gone on long enough." Shíí'ì studied her face, recognizing the determination there. "We will watch. If there is chance for words, you may speak. But at first sign of danger, you return to caves with children." Sarah nodded, accepting the compromise. She hurried to prepare her children, explaining to Emma and Thomas in hushed tones while gathering rose from her sleeping furs. "Are the bad men coming?" Thomas asked, clutching the hunting knife Shíí'ì had recently given him for his 8th birthday. "We don't know if they're bad," Sarah answered carefully. "But we need to be safe until we find out." As she ushered her children toward the caves where the tribe's women and younger members were gathering, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. She gasped, steadying herself against a rock wall. Kijoni was instantly at her side. "What is wrong?" "Nothing," Sarah assured her, straightening with effort. "Just worry." But as they climbed the narrow path to the caves, the pain returned, stronger this time. Sarah had experienced this before, with each of her children. But it was too soon. Barely 7 months since her marriage to Shíí'ì had been consummated. Inside the largest cave, Unju took one look at Sarah's face and beckoned her to a secluded corner. Her gnarled hands pressed gently on Sarah's swollen belly, her expression growing concerned. "The child comes early," she pronounced, "brought by fear and hard journey." Sarah shook her head in denial. "It can't, not now." But her body disagreed, as another contraction gripped her. Nju called for Kijoni and several other women, giving rapid instructions. Birth blankets were arranged, water was brought from a small spring at the back of the cave, and herbs were prepared for tea. "Emma!" Sarah called, reaching for her eldest. "Stay with Thomas and Rose, keep them calm." Emma nodded solemnly, her young face showing a maturity beyond her years. "I will, Mama. Don't worry about us." As the night deepened and her labor progressed, Sarah drifted in and out of awareness of the larger crisis. She heard murmured reports. The riders had made camp by the stream. They had military sabers but wore no uniforms. They carried a bottle, passed between them. "Bounty hunters," someone whispered, "or militia, not regular army." Between contractions, Sarah prayed, to the Christian God of her upbringing and to the spirits Shíí'ì had taught her to honor. She prayed for her children's safety, for the tribe that had become her family, and for the tiny life struggling to enter a world fraught with danger. Near dawn, as the first hints of light filtered into the cave entrance, Sarah's son was born. Small, but strong lunged, his angry cry announcing his arrival to a hushed audience. "A warrior comes in darkness," Unzu declared, cleaning the infant with practiced hands before placing him on Sarah's chest. "Born when danger circles. This one will have strong medicine." Sarah gazed down at her son, Shíí'ì's son, his skin a shade darker than her other children's, his shock of black hair unmistakably Apache. In his tiny features, she saw his father's strength blended with her own determination. As she cradled him, Kijoni entered the cave, her expression both joyful and urgent. "A son, I must tell my brother." Then, lowering her voice, "The men below have been drinking all night. One raves and shouts your name. Shíí'ì thinks it is your father." Exhausted from birth but galvanized by this news, Sarah struggled to sit up. "I need to see. Help me." "You cannot walk," Nju protested. The bleeding barely stopped. Then, "Carry me," Sarah insisted. "I must see if it's him." After a heated debate, a compromise was reached. 2 strong women helped Sarah to a vantage point near the cave entrance, concealed behind rocks but with a clear view of the camp below. Shíí'ì and several warriors had positioned themselves on the ridges above, watching silently. Through the early morning mist, Sarah could make out the men around a dying campfire. 5 were strangers, rough-looking men with the hard eyes, of those who hunted human prey for money. But the 6th, the one gesturing wildly and drinking straight from a distinctive silver flask, was unmistakable. Jeremiah Matthews had found them at last. Tension gripped the canyon as the tribe prepared for the confrontation that seemed inevitable. Warriors checked weapons, while women gathered supplies for a possible evacuation. The peace pipe, a sacred object used only in the most solemn tribal councils, had been brought out during the night's emergency meeting, its ceremonial use underscoring the gravity of their decisions. Shíí'į scaled the narrow path to the caves where Sarah rested with their newborn son. He found her sitting upright despite Anju's protests, her face pale but determined as she nursed the infant. He knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on the child's head. "Strong lungs," he observed, pride evident in his voice despite the dire circumstances. "Born in danger, fearless already." "He needs a name," Sarah said softly, "something meaningful for both our traditions." Shíí'į studied the tiny face. "Honarha," he suggested. "It means sunrise in our tongue. Born." As light comes after dark night, Sarah tested the name, her pronunciation careful after months of learning the language. "Honaga, it's beautiful." She looked up at her husband, fear and resolve mingling in her eyes. "What's happening below?" "Your father and 5 hunters make camp still. They drink, argue." His expression darkened. "One wears blue coat. Former soldier, I think, more dangerous than others. They'll search the canyon when they're done drinking," Sarah predicted, knowing her father's patterns all too well. "What are our options?" Shíí'į sat back on his heels, the weight of leadership evident in his posture. "3 choices. Fight. We have advantage of high ground, knowledge of land. 6 men could be overcome, but not without cost. And it would bring more soldiers," Sarah added grimly. "Yes." He nodded. "Second choice, escape. Women, children already prepare for journey to southern canyons, but you cannot travel far, not so soon after birth." "I can manage if I must," Sarah insisted, though her exhaustion was evident. "Third choice is most dangerous." Shíí'į met her gaze directly. "You speak to them. Tell truth. Hope this soldier man has honor enough to listen." The baby finished nursing, and Sarah adjusted her clothing, cradling him against her shoulder. "My father won't listen to reason. He never has. But if there's a military man with actual authority—" Her words were interrupted by Emma slipping into the cave, her expression urgent. "The men are moving! They're coming up the main path to the village." Shíí'į was on his feet instantly. "Stay here," he ordered. "I will send word when safe." He paused at the entrance, looking back at his family. His white wife, their newborn son, the 3 children who had become his own. The complexity of emotions in that glance spoke volumes before he disappeared down the path. "Mama, what's going to happen?" Emma asked, her voice small, despite her efforts to appear brave. Sarah drew her daughter close with her free arm. "I don't know, sweetheart, but whatever comes, we face it together." Thomas and Rose huddled nearby with Kijoni, picking up on the tension but not fully comprehending its cause. Rose clutched a small wooden doll Shíí'į had carved for her, while Thomas gripped his knife with white-knuckle determination. From their elevated position, they could hear shouts as the searchers entered the village, followed by the measured tones of Shíí'į speaking in English. The exchange grew more heated, individual words occasionally carrying up to them on the morning breeze. "My daughter, willing choice, reward for information, no captives here." Then, rising above the others, the unmistakable voice of Jeremiah Matthews, slurred with whiskey even in the early hours. "Sarah, damn you, girl, I know you're here. Show yourself." The raw fury in his voice transported Sarah instantly back to nights of cowering, of shielding her children from his rages. Her body trembled with instinctive fear, but beside her Emma straightened, her young face hardening. "He can't hurt us anymore," Emma declared with quiet conviction. "We're not alone now." A young warrior appeared at the cave entrance, breathless from his climb. "Chief says come. Soldier wants proof you are here by choice, all of you." Sarah exchanged glances with Shíí'į, who nodded encouragingly. "We'll help you down the path." "No," Sarah decided after a moment's thought. "If I appear weak or frightened, it strengthens my father's claims." She passed the baby to Shíí'ĩ and struggled to her feet, ignoring the pain that shot through her still recovering body. "Bring Honaga. Children, stay close to me. Let them see we are here willingly, that we are family." Leaning on a walking stick but otherwise refusing assistance, Sarah began the difficult descent. Each step sent waves of pain through her, but she kept her head high, determined to show no weakness before the men who threatened her hard-won happiness. The confrontation awaiting her in the village clearing would determine not just her fate, but that of her children and the tribe that had become her own. As she made her careful way down the rocky path, Sarah touched the silver coin at her throat, Shíí'ì's first gift to her, drawing strength from its cool weight against her skin. Whatever happened next, she would face it on her feet, as the woman she had become, no longer a victim, but a mother who would fight with every breath for her family's safety and freedom. The village clearing had transformed into an arena of tension. On one side stood Shíí'ì with several warriors, their faces impassive but bodies alert to any threat. Opposite them were the 6 visitors, 5 hard-faced men with rifles held casually but ready, and Jeremiah Matthews, his silver whiskey, flask glinting in the morning light as he took another swig. Sarah paused at the edge of the clearing, gathering her strength before the final steps that would bring her face to face with her father for the first time in nearly 6 months. Emma and Thomas flanked her protectively, while Shíí'ì stood slightly behind, cradling Honaga. "There she is!" Jeremiah's voice cracked with a mixture of triumph and rage as he spotted her. "I told you these savages had her." A man in a faded blue cavalry jacket, clearly once an officer, though he wore no insignia now, stepped forward, studying Sarah critically. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Miller. We've been authorized to escort you and your children back to civilization. Are you being held against your will?" Before Sarah could answer, Jeremiah lurched forward. "Course she is. Look at her, dressed like a squaw, barely standing." He jabbed a finger toward Shíí'ì. "This one's forced himself on her, made her his slave." The raw hatred in her father's voice made Sarah flinch, but she straightened, stepping fully into the clearing despite her pain. "I am here by choice, Captain," she said clearly. "My children. And I fled my father's abuse 6 months ago. These people saved our lives when we were dying in the desert." "Lies," Jeremiah spat. "They've turned her against her own kind." Captain Miller raised a hand, silencing him. "Let the woman speak." Sarah moved closer, wanting the captain to see her clearly, to recognize the truth in her eyes. "My father nearly killed me more than once. When he turned his violence toward my children, we escaped. Chief Shíí'ì found us collapsed at a spring, gave us shelter, healed my youngest who was sick with fever." She gestured to Emma and Thomas. "Ask my children if you don't believe me." Miller's gaze shifted to the children, his expression softening slightly. "Is this true, young lady?" he asked Emma. Emma stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "Grandfather hurt Mama. He was going to hurt me next. We ran away. The Apache people have been kind to us. Chief Shíí'ì is our father now." "Brainwashed," Jeremiah growled. "All of them." Sarah was always weak-minded, easily led astray. "I am Chief Shíí'ì's wife," Sarah declared firmly. "We were married in their tradition 4 months ago." She nodded toward Shíí'ì, who stepped forward with the infant. "This is our son, born just hours ago." A murmur ran through the bounty hunters at this revelation. Even Captain Miller seemed taken aback, his weathered face registering surprise as he looked at the clearly mixed heritage infant. "Half-breed bastard," Jeremiah snarled, his hand moving toward the pistol at his belt. You've shamed our family name, girl. Better you died in the desert. Shíí'į moved with lightning speed, positioning himself between Sarah and her father. This woman is my wife, he stated in careful English. These children are my children. By your laws and ours, we are family. You have no claim here. Miller studied the scene thoughtfully, his military experience evident in his measured assessment of the situation. The poster said kidnapping. This doesn't look like a kidnapping to me. He turned to Jeremiah. You failed to mention some relevant details in your report, Matthews. She's my daughter. Under law, she belongs to me since her husband died. Jeremiah's face had grown florid with rage and drink. I'm taking her home. I am home, Sarah stated, quietly but firmly. Her father's expression twisted with fury. He yanked the whiskey flask from his pocket, took a final swig, then hurled it to the ground. Ungrateful whore, after all I've done for you. The silver flask landed in the dust between them, a physical manifestation of the poison that had destroyed their family bond. Sarah stared at it, remembering all the times that flask had preceded violence, how the smell of whiskey had become synonymous with fear in their household. What you've done, Sarah echoed, her voice gaining strength. You sold John's store from under me, dragged us to that isolated cabin, beat me until I couldn't stand, terrified your grandchildren, and now you've brought armed men to our doorstep. She shook her head. You've done quite enough, Father. A tense silence followed her words. The bounty hunters exchanged uneasy glances, clearly reassessing the situation. Captain Miller's hand had moved subtly away from his weapon, his stance less threatening. The reward poster mentioned $200, one of the hunters ventured. That's still standing, Matthews? You'll get nothing until my daughter and grandchildren are secured, Jeremiah snapped. Miller shook his head slowly. I don't see captives needing rescue here. I see a woman who's made her choice, however unconventional. He turned to Shíí'į. Chief, I have no quarrel with your band. As far as I'm concerned, my job was to verify this woman's safety, which I've done. You yellow-bellied. Coward! Jeremiah roared, his control finally snapping completely. I paid you good money. You paid me to find your daughter, not kidnap her, Miller corrected coldly. Mission accomplished. As the men argued, Sarah noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Now Guy and several warriors had appeared silently on the ridges above, bows drawn and ready. Women and children watched from doorways, prepared to flee at the first sign of violence. The tribe was positioned for either defense or evacuation, depending on how the confrontation unfolded. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, peace or bloodshed hanging in the balance. Sarah stepped forward, determined to end the standoff before it escalated further, when suddenly Zhu emerged from her wickiup, her ancient figure commanding immediate attention. The old woman walked slowly but deliberately toward the gathered men, her medicine bundle clutched in gnarled hands. All eyes turned to her, conversation ceasing as she approached. Even Jeremiah fell silent, perhaps sensing the power that radiated from the frail figure. Zhu stopped directly between the two groups, a human boundary between worlds in conflict. She looked first at Sarah, then at Shíí'į, and finally at Captain Miller, her dark eyes seeming to see beyond the immediate tension to something only she could perceive. When she spoke, her voice carried surprising strength. The spirits are watching, she said in Apache, which Kijoni quickly translated. Blood spilled here will bring great sorrow to all. Nju's presence created a momentary pause in the confrontation, her ancient dignity commanding respect even from the bounty hunters who couldn't understand her words. Into this stillness, Captain Miller stepped forward, removing his hat in a gesture of respect toward the old woman. Chief, he addressed Shíí'į, I believe I've seen enough. There's been a misunderstanding. He withdrew a folded document from his jacket, official military paperwork with elaborate letterhead. I have orders to investigate a reported kidnapping. Since there's clearly been no kidnapping, my mission is complete. Sarah felt a surge of hope at the captain's reasonable tone, but her father's reaction was immediate and volatile. "The hell it is!" Jeremiah shouted, his hand moving to his pistol. "I paid you and these men good money to bring back my daughter and grandchildren." "You paid us to find them," Miller corrected coolly. "Nothing was said about forcing a woman against her will." He turned to the other hunters. "We're leaving, boys. No reward justifies what this man's asking." Two of the men nodded in agreement, already stepping back, but the others hesitated, eyeing the potential payment they were about to lose. Tension crackled in the air as allegiances shifted. "Mrs. Matthews," Miller continued, addressing Sarah, "directly, I'd like your formal statement that you're here voluntarily for the record." He gestured to the document. "Army bureaucracy requires documentation." Sarah moved forward carefully, still weak from childbirth but determined to resolve. "This peacefully. I'll provide whatever statement you need, Captain. My children and I fled my father's abuse and found sanctuary here. Chief Shíí'į and I were married according to Apache tradition. I'm now a member of this tribe by choice. You treacherous." "Haw!" Jeremiah lunged suddenly, not towards Sarah but toward the infant in Kijoni's arms. "I'll not have my family name tainted by a half-breed savage." What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed. Shíí'į moved to intercept Jeremiah, while Kijoni turned sharply away, shielding the baby. N'ju, directly in Jeremiah's path, raised her hands in what might have been warning or defense. The crack of a pistol shot echoed through the canyon. N'ju crumpled to the ground, dark blood blossoming on her chest where Jeremiah's wild shot had struck her. Screams erupted as chaos descended. Warriors on the ridges loosed arrows in response, one striking a bounty hunter in the shoulder. Captain Miller shouted for order, his commands lost in the mayhem. "Grandmother!" Kijoni's anguished cry cut through the noise as she knelt beside the fallen elder, still clutching Honagar protectively. Sarah rushed to N'ju's side, her medical training from both worlds coming together as she pressed her hands to the wound, desperately trying to stem the bleeding. The old woman's eyes were open but growing dim, her breathing shallow. "Stay with us," Sarah pleaded. "We need you, grandmother." Shíí'į had Jeremiah pinned to the ground, the older man struggling and cursing beneath him. Captain Miller had drawn his own weapon, creating a standoff with the remaining bounty hunters, who now looked uncertain about which side to take. "Enough!" Miller roared with full military authority. "Lower your weapons. This man," he pointed to Jeremiah, "has just shot an unarmed elderly woman. He'll face justice for that." Two of the bounty hunters immediately backed away, hands raised. Another kept his rifle trained on the Apache warriors. "They're still savages," he muttered. "Can't trust them not to slaughter us now." "They would be justified," Miller snapped. "But they haven't attacked yet, have they? Despite ample provocation." He addressed Shíí'į directly. "Chief, I give you my word as an officer. This man will answer for what he's done. Let me take him to fort." "Grant for trial." Shíí'į looked from Miller to N'ju, torn between vengeance and the wisdom she had always counseled. The old woman's eyes found his, and though she couldn't speak, something passed between them, a final teaching from mentor to student. "Take him," Shíí'ĩ finally said, releasing Jeremiah but keeping a foot firmly on his chest. "But know this, if he returns, he dies." Miller nodded gravely. "Understood." He gestured to two of his men. "Secure Matthews. He's under arrest for attempted murder." As they hauled Jeremiah to his feet and bound his wrists, he continued to rant, his face contorted with hatred. "This isn't over, Sarah. No daughter of mine lives with savages. I'll see this whole tribe wiped out before I let that happen." "That's enough," Miller said sharply, nodding to one of the men who promptly gagged Jeremiah with a bandana. Sarah barely heard any of this exchange, her focus entirely on N'ju. The old woman's breathing had grown more labored, blood continuing to seep between Sarah's fingers despite her best efforts. "Bring my medicine bag," Sarah instructed Emma, who ran to comply, "and clean cloths, water, the fire spirit's Kijoni keeps for wounds. As Emma returned with the requested items, Anjou reached up with surprising strength, grasping Sarah's wrist. Her lips moved, forming words too faint to hear. Sarah leaned closer. "The third path," the old woman whispered. "You must find it now. Danger, not over." Sarah's heart sank with the realization that Anjou understood the gravity of her wound. "Don't speak. Save your strength. We're going to help you." But Anjou's eyes, though clouding with pain, remained lucid and insistent. "Listen. The spirits show me. Soldiers come. Many. Soon." Her fingers tightened on Sarah's wrist. "My time ends. Yours continues. Protect our people. Our people." The simple phrase acknowledged what Sarah had come to feel, that this tribe was now her family, her responsibility as much as Shíí'ì's. She nodded, tears blurring her, a vision as she worked to clean and bind the wound, knowing even as she did that her efforts might not be enough. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood beside Shíí'ì in a makeshift courtroom at Fort Grant, her testimony complete after hours of questioning. The military tribunal had been convened not only to address Jeremiah's actions, but also to determine Sarah's legal status, whether she remained under her father's authority or could be recognized as Shíí'ì's wife under territorial law. Shíí'ì, document before her, a preliminary treaty promising the tribe territorial rights in exchange for peace, seemed to offer hope, but Sarah had learned to be wary of written promises. Too often, such papers proved worthless when tested against white settlers' greed or military expediency. Captain Miller had proven unexpectedly supportive, his testimony corroborating Sarah's account and describing her father's unprovoked attack on Anjou. Against all odds, the elderly healer had survived, though she remained weakened, her recovery uncertain. Mrs. Matthews, or should I say Mrs. Shíí'ì, the presiding colonel addressed her, "Your situation is unprecedented in this territory. A white woman voluntarily married to an Apache chief, with children of both bloodlines." He gestured to where Emma, Thomas, and Rose sat quietly, with Kijoni, baby Honagar, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "The law provides no clear guidance. The law recognizes marriage," Sarah countered respectfully but firmly, "and parental rights. My husband is a recognized leader of his people. Our marriage, though conducted according to Apache tradition, is no less valid than one performed in your church." The colonel frowned, shuffling through affidavits and reports. "There is also the matter of your father's claims. Despite his regrettable actions, he insists you are not of sound mind, having been unduly influenced during your time with the Apache band." Sarah squared her shoulders, meeting the colonel's gaze directly. "I made my choice freely, sir. As the mother of 4 children, I chose their safety and happiness over continued abuse. As a woman who had lost one husband to disease, I accepted another who offered protection and respect. There was no coercion, only survival and eventually genuine affection." From the prisoner's box, Jeremiah muttered something derogatory, earning a sharp reprimand from his guard. His trial for the shooting would follow this hearing, with a likely sentence of imprisonment at Yuma Territorial Prison. After conferring with his fellow officers, the colonel cleared his throat. "It is the finding of this tribunal that Mrs. Sarah Matthews acted of her own free will in joining the Apache band led by Chief Shíí'ì, and that her subsequent marriage to said chief constitutes a legally recognized union under territorial common law." He rapped his gavel. "The petitioner's claim of kidnapping is dismissed, and custody of all children is confirmed to remain with their mother and her current husband." Relief washed through Sarah. Beside her, Shíí'ì remained outwardly stoic, but she felt the slight relaxation in his posture, the only sign of his profound relief. Their victory celebration was short-lived. As they prepared to depart the fort, Captain Miller approached with a troubled expression, a telegram in hand. "You should see this," he said quietly, passing the paper to Shíí'ĩ, who had learned enough English to read simple messages. Shíí'ĩ's face darkened as he scanned the contents, then handed it to Sarah. The message was brief but devastating. Orders from Washington directing all non-reservation Apache bands to be relocated to San Carlos Reservation immediately, with military force authorized for any resistance. "This can't be right," Sarah protested, looking to Miller. "The treaty was never ratified," Miller finished grimly. "I'm sorry. New Indian commissioner in Washington has different priorities." "When?" Shíí'ĩ asked simply. 2 weeks. Major Winston arrives with 3 cavalry companies to begin relocations. Miller lowered his voice. "Your band is specifically mentioned, suspected of harboring a white woman. Your father may be headed to prison, but it seems his accusations reached sympathetic ears in Washington before that." The implications struck Sarah like a physical blow. 3 cavalry companies, over 100 soldiers, against their small band. No chance of successful resistance, yet reservation life would mean the slow death of their culture, their freedom, their dignity. "What choice do we have?" she asked, desperation edging her voice. Miller glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Officially none, unofficially. Mexico is 50 miles south. Army jurisdiction ends at the border." "You suggest we flee?" Shíí'ĩ asked, studying the captain's face. "I suggest nothing," Miller replied carefully. "I merely observe that many Apache bands have relatives across the border who live free of reservation restrictions." He straightened his uniform jacket. "You have 2 weeks before Winston arrives. How you use that time is your business." As they rode back to their canyon home that evening, the children unusually subdued, as if sensing the adults' concern. Sarah and Shíí'ĩ discussed their limited options in low voices. "The reservation would kill our people's spirit," Shíí'ĩ said. "Children raised without pride, elders dying without dignity. I have seen it at San Carlos." "And Mexico?" Sarah asked her what awaits us there. "Uncertainty, hardship." He met her gaze steadily. "But freedom. Chance to live as Nde, the people." Sarah thought of all they would leave behind, the canyon that had become home, the graves of ancestors, the familiar hunting grounds and sacred places. Then she looked at her children, at Honagar sleeping against her chest, and knew there was only one possible choice. "Then we go south," she said simply, "all of us, together." That night, as the tribe gathered around the central fire to hear their decision, Sarah witnessed true leadership in her husband's careful words, his honesty about the challenges ahead, balanced with quiet confidence in their ability to overcome them. "Our ancestors survived by adapting," he reminded them, "like water finding. New path when rocks block the stream. We do not break, we flow around." Now Guy, who had become one of their strongest supporters since Unju's injury, stood to address the gathering. "I will stay behind with 5 warriors," he volunteered. "We will make sign of large camp, many fires, to draw soldiers away from your true path south." The sacrifice inherent in his offer silenced the assembly. Everyone understood what it likely meant: capture at best, death at worst. "Cousin," Shíí'ĩ began, but now Guy raised his hand. "My choice," he said firmly. "As Sarah chose to join us, I choose to protect our people's escape. This is warrior's honor." As the tribe dispersed to begin preparations for their journey, Sarah sought out Unju, finding the old woman sitting outside her wickiup, face turned toward the evening stars. "You were right," Sarah said softly, settling beside her. "The third path requires bending like the willow." Unju's weathered hand found hers. "You found it," she whispered, her voice still weak from her injury. "The path between worlds. Not Apache only, not white only. Something new." Her fingers tightened. "Remember our ways. Teach children. Stories must continue." Sarah bowed her head, the weight of this responsibility settling on her shoulders. "I will," she promised. "Your wisdom won't be forgotten." The night of their departure arrived with no moon to betray their movement, only stars scattered like silver coins across the velvet sky. Sarah stood for a final moment at the entrance to the wickiup that had been her home, committing every detail to memory. The patterns of woven mats, the central fire pit now cold, the children's sleeping furs neatly rolled and packed. In her pocket, she carried a precious artifact, a small tintype photograph taken by a sympathetic photographer in the town near Fort Grant. It showed her entire family, Sarah with Honaha in her arms, Emma and Thomas and Rose arranged before her, and Shíí'į standing proud and straight beside them. It was the only image they would have of themselves, a tangible reminder of their unlikely union should memories ever fade. "It is time," Shíí'į said softly from behind her. Sarah nodded, turning away from their abandoned home. The tribe had spent days in careful preparation, selecting which items were essential enough to warrant the burden of carrying them, preserving food for the journey, planning their route through the most remote terrain to avoid detection. The band moved like shadows through the canyon that had sheltered them for generations. Children were carried to prevent any sound, horses' hooves wrapped in cloth to muffle their steps. Even the infants seemed to sense the need for silence, their usual cries replaced by solemn observation. At the canyon entrance, Naugai and his 5 volunteers waited to bid them farewell. Each warrior had volunteered, knowing the likely consequences of their decision to remain behind and create a false trail for the approaching soldiers. "Brother," Naugai said, clasping Shíí'į's arm in the warrior's grip they had shared since boyhood, "lead our people to safety. We will give you 3 days before we begin making sign for soldiers to follow. Your sacrifice will be remembered in our stories," Shíí'ĩ replied, emotion evident despite his controlled expression. "Your children's children will know your courage." Naugai turned to Sarah, his initial hostility now a distant memory. "White sister," he said, the term an acknowledgement of her acceptance into the tribe. "You brought change to our band. I fought against it." His mouth quirked in a rare smile. "I was wrong." "Take care, brother," Sarah responded, having earned the right to use the term. "Perhaps someday we'll meet again in better times." Perhaps. But his tone suggested he did not expect it. As they parted ways, Sarah glanced back to see Naugai, standing tall against the night sky, his silhouette a sentinel guarding their escape. She silently thanked the complex, difficult man who had become family through shared hardship and grudging respect. The journey south was arduous, made more challenging by the need for stealth and the presence of young children. They traveled primarily at night, resting during daylight hours in hidden arroyos or caves. Sarah's medical knowledge, combined with Nju's teachings, was frequently called upon to treat blistered feet, heat exhaustion, and the myriad minor injuries that accompanied their desperate migration. On the 5th day, as they crouched in the shadow of a rocky outcropping waiting for night to fall, a distant sound froze them all in place. Hoofbeats, many of them, approaching from the north. Scouts were immediately dispatched, returning with grim news. "Cavalry patrol," the young warrior reported. 20 riders following our old trail. Naugai's diversion failed. Anxiety rippled through the group. They were still 10 miles from the border, in open country with few places to hide a band of their size. "We cannot outrun mounted soldiers," one elder stated the obvious. "Nor can we fight such numbers," added another. Shíí'ĩ studied the terrain ahead, his expression resolute. "We divide," he decided. "Small groups, different paths, same destination. Harder to track, harder to catch all." It was a painful but necessary strategy. Families would be temporarily separated, each group taking a different route toward their rallying point across the border. Shíí'ĩ quickly organized the divisions, ensuring each group had experienced guides and sufficient supplies. When it came to his own family, he faced Sarah with regret in his eyes. "You and children must go with Kijoni's group," he said. I lead warriors to draw soldiers east, away from your path. Sarah wanted to protest, to insist they stay together, but she understood the tactical necessity. Promise you'll find us, she said instead, holding Honorar close against her chest. Nothing could prevent it, he assured her, touching each child's head in blessing before pressing his forehead briefly to hers, an intimate gesture rarely displayed before others. As the groups prepared to separate, a distant rumble shook the ground, not horses, but thunder. Looking west, they saw storm clouds gathering, unusual for the season, but welcome in their circumstances. A gift from the ancestors, Nju declared from her travois. Rain will wash away our tracks. By nightfall, the storm had broken over them, drenching the desert in sheets of driving rain. Lightning split the sky, momentarily illuminating their scattered bands as they moved south through the downpour. Miserable, but grateful for the natural concealment, Sarah led Emma, Thomas, and Rose through the rain-soaked darkness. Honorar, protected beneath her clothing, his small warmth against her chest, a reminder of all they fought to preserve. The older children, understanding the gravity of their situation, followed without complaint, Emma helping Thomas navigate the slippery terrain, Thomas in turn assisting Rose when the smaller girl struggled. When they finally crested a rise and Eugenie pointed to a valley beyond, Sarah realized they had reached a significant milestone. The border, Kijoni confirmed. Mexico begins there. The children were too exhausted to appreciate the moment, but Sarah paused, looking back toward the north where Shíí'į and his warriors were drawing danger away from them. Then she turned south toward uncertainty but also possibility and continued forward into their new life. 5 years passed, marked by seasons rather than calendars in their new home, a hidden valley nestled in the Sierra Madre Mountains of northern Mexico. What had begun as a temporary refuge had gradually transformed into a permanent settlement, the wickiups of their hasty first encampment, replaced by more substantial structures that blended Apache tradition with local materials. Sarah stood at the entrance to her home, a new medicine bundle in her hands, carefully crafted with elements from both her worlds. Eagle feathers and sage sat alongside carefully cultivated European herbs. Catholic medallions nestled against traditional Apache healing stones. The bundle represented her own transformation, no longer simply Sarah Matthews, nor merely the chief's white wife, but Na'ahol, she who heals, a name given to her by Nju before the old woman had finally joined the ancestors 2 winters past. Her role as the band's primary healer had evolved naturally after Nju's passing. Her knowledge of white medicine complementing the traditional practices she had learned from the old woman. People from neighboring Mexican villages occasionally sought her skills as well, creating unexpected bridges between communities that might otherwise have remained suspicious of one another. "Mama, look what I made!" Rose, now 7, raced toward, her proudly displaying an intricately woven basket. No longer the sickly toddler who had collapsed in the desert, Rose had flourished in their new life, her natural exuberance finding expression in both Apache crafts and the Spanish songs she learned from Mexican children. "Beautiful work," Sarah praised, examining the tight weave and complex pattern. "Grandmother Nju would be proud of your fingers." Rose beamed at the comparison. Though too young to clearly remember the old healer, she had grown up on stories of the wise woman who had saved her life and guided their people to safety. "Can I take it to show Emma at the school?" "Of course," Sarah agreed. "But remember—" I know," Rose interrupted with the impatience of childhood. "Stay with the other children, don't wander off alone." Though relations with their Mexican neighbors had gradually warmed from cautious tolerance to genuine cooperation, old habits of vigilance died hard. Safety for their children remained a constant concern, especially as rumors occasionally reached them of American military expeditions crossing the border in pursuit of Apache bands. Rose skipped away toward the small school at the center of their settlement where Emma, now 15, assisted in teaching both Apache and Mexican children. The one-room structure, built of adobe in the local style rather than the traditional Apache wickiup, symbolized the pragmatic adaptations that had ensured their survival. Emma had developed into a natural teacher, her gift for languages enabling her to move fluidly between Apache, English, and Spanish. Under her guidance, the tribe's children were growing up trilingual, equipped to navigate multiple worlds in ways their parents never could. Thomas, at 12, spent most of his days with the hunters and horsemen, developing into a skilled rider, whose knowledge of both Apache tracking techniques and Mexican vaquero methods made him an asset to hunting parties. His mixed heritage, once a potential liability, had become a strength in their border existence, and Honaga, Sarah's son with Shíí'į, now a sturdy 5-year-old with his father's observant eyes and his mother's quick smile, represented the literal embodiment of their blended community. Born in crisis, named for the dawn that follows darkness, he moved confidently between cultural worlds that his older siblings still sometimes struggled to reconcile. Sarah's reflections were interrupted by the distant sound of returning horses, the hunting party returning earlier than expected. She shaded her eyes against the afternoon sun, immediately recognizing Shíí'ì's distinctive riding posture at the head of the group. 5 years had added silver threads to his black hair, now worn shorter in concession to changing times. Lines of responsibility had deepened around his eyes and mouth, yet he sat his horse with the same natural authority that had first impressed her at the hidden spring so long ago. As always, her heart quickened at the sight of him. Their marriage, begun as a pragmatic arrangement, had deepened into something neither could have anticipated, a partnership forged in crisis, tested by hardship, and strengthened by shared purpose. What had started with mutual respect had grown into genuine love, no less powerful for its gradual, quiet development. Shíí'ì dismounted in a fluid motion, speaking briefly to Thomas, who had ridden at his side before making his way to Sarah. His expression held news, whether good or ill she couldn't yet determine. "Traders from the north," he said without preamble, taking her hands in his. "They bring word from American territories." Sarah tensed, immediate concern for Naugai and the others who had sacrificed themselves for their escape, rising in her mind. "What news?" "New policy in Washington," Shíí'ì explained. "President speaks of reform in Indian affairs. Some bans being given land, allowed to return from reservations." His eyes held cautious hope. "Maybe, in time, we could go home." Home! The word evoked complex emotions, memories of the canyon where they had first built a life together, where ancestors' graves connected the people to the land in ways that transcended political boundaries. Yet this valley had become home too, a place where their children had grown strong and their community had put down new roots. "Would you want to return?" Sarah asked carefully. "After all we've built here?" Shíí'ì glanced around at their settlement, at the blend of traditional and new, at the children playing in both Apache and Mexican styles, at the life they had forged from desperate beginnings. "I don't know," he admitted. "Our old lands call to me in dreams, but this," he gestured to encompass their community, "this is something new, something our ancestors could not have imagined." His gaze returned to her face. "What do you think?" "My wife." In his willingness to seek her counsel lay the answer to how far they had both come. He from the traditional chief who had once made unilateral decisions. She from the desperate mother with few choices. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "that home is where our family is whole and free. Whether that's here or there, we'll decide together when the time comes." The evening air carried the scent of piñon smoke and cooking fires as the tribe gathered for their autumn equinox celebration, a blend of traditional Apache ceremonies and elements borrowed from their Mexican neighbors. Children darted between. Adults, their laughter a universal language that needed no translation, Musicians played instruments both ancient and new, traditional Apache flutes harmonizing with Mexican guitars in a melody that symbolized their evolving identity. Sarah sat beside Shíí'į on a woven blanket spread atop a small rise overlooking their settlement. From this vantage point, they could observe the entire gathering. Apache families mingling with a few trusted Mexican neighbors, young people teaching each other dances from their respective traditions, elders exchanging stories despite language. Barriers. In Sarah's lap rested a worn eagle feather quill and a small leather-bound journal, her latest project of recording their family's history in both English and Apache syllabary. She had begun the writing after Nju's passing, determined that their journey and the old woman's wisdom would not be lost to future generations. "You capture our story well," Shíí'į observed, nodding toward the journal. "Words like tracks in sand, showing where we have walked." Sarah smiled at the poetic comparison. "I want Honaga and his children to understand where they came from, both sides of their heritage, the good and the difficult." Their son sat with Thomas nearby, solemnly practicing a traditional blessing song under the guidance of an elder. At 5, he already showed the thoughtful nature of his father, combined with his mother's determination. Unlike his older siblings, who had memories of life before, Honaga had known only this blended existence, giving him a unique perspective. Unburdened by the sharp distinctions between Apache ways and white ways. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked suddenly, the question emerging from years of reflection. "Taking in a white woman and her children, all the change and danger it brought to your people?" Shíí'į considered the question with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "The eagle led me to the spring that day," he said finally. "I followed. The path was not easy, but it was right." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. "Look there." He gestured toward where Emma stood with a group of younger children, her graceful hands moving as she translated a story between languages, her confidence and poise evident in every gesture. Nearby, Thomas demonstrated proper bow technique to both Apache and Mexican boys, his instructor's patience reflecting his stepfather's influence. Rose wove between groups, collecting flowers for garlands, equally comfortable with all present. "Ah, children bridge worlds," Shíí'į continued. "Not Apache only, not white only, something new, something stronger." His gaze returned to Sarah. "Like us." The simple truth of his observation settled over Sarah with profound clarity. What had begun as an unlikely alliance forged from desperation had transformed into something neither culture could have anticipated, a genuine melding of traditions, perspectives, and strengths. As if sensing the significance of the moment, Honaga left his lesson and climbed the small rise to join his parents. Without words, he settled between them, his small hand reaching for his father's eagle feather that marked his leadership, his other hand touching his mother's journal that preserved their history. "Tell me again about the spring," he requested, his eyes bright with interest in a story he had heard countless times but never tired of. "About when the eagle showed father the way to find you." Sarah exchanged a glance with Shíí'į, both recognizing their son's request as part of the essential tradition of oral history, the stories that bound generations together, that carried wisdom forward through time. "Well," Sarah began, setting aside her quill, "it was the hottest part of summer, when the air shimmers above the desert like water." As she recounted their beginning, the desperate flight across the desert, the collapse at the hidden spring, the unexpected appearance of Shíí'ĩ following the eagle's guidance, Honaga listened with the solemn attention of a child absorbing his origin story. Gradually, other children drifted toward them, drawn by the familiar tale that had become part of their communal identity. Emma joined them, adding details from her own memories, followed by Thomas and Rose. Soon a circle had formed around them, Apache and Mexican children alike settling to hear the account that explained the unusual, mixed family at the center of their community. The story continued as the first stars appeared above the mountains, pinpricks of silver against deepening blue. Sarah's voice blended with Shíí'ì's as they took turns narrating different parts of their journey. The wedding ceremony, the birth of Hanukkah, the dangerous flight south, the building of their new home. When they finished, the night had fully arrived, wrapping the gathering in velvet darkness, relieved only by firelight and stars. The children dispersed reluctantly, returning to the main celebration where music had resumed. Shíí'ì rose and extended his hand to Sarah, helping her to her feet with the simple courtesy that had been part of their relationship from the beginning. Together they walked down toward the fires, their children falling into step beside them. Above them, an eagle soared on night thermals, its silhouette briefly visible against the star-filled sky before disappearing into the darkness, a Shíí'ì reminder of the unseen guidance that had brought them together against all odds, and the continuing journey that lay ahead. Like the eagle, they had learned to navigate between worlds, to find currents invisible to others, and to build their nest in the spaces between, creating something enduring from the harsh trials of the heart.